You open your eyes, and the world is wrong. The air smells like smoke and earth. There are no buzzing lights, no distant traffic, no glass on the windows, just wood, straw, and the faint clatter of hooves in the distance. You've woken up in a time not meant for you. No phones, no maps, no modern help, only the slow, strange rhythm of the Middle Ages. Tonight, we'll walk through that world. Step by step, you'll learn what it means to live, eat, and survive here without anyone knowing you don't belong. Before we begin, if you enjoy calm journeys through forgotten times, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me keep telling these long, sleepy stories. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now, close your eyes, and let's begin. Straw beds and stone walls. It's not the sun that wakes you, it's the chill. A damp cold presses against your cheek, seeping through the linen fabric tucked loosely beneath your neck. It smells of straw, musty and old, mixed with something faintly sour, maybe sweat, maybe the soft rot of rushes strewn on the floor. You open your eyes slowly. The light is pale, diffused through a slit in the wooden wall where the boards don't quite meet. Dust floats in the shaft of sunlight, like tiny drifting stars. There's no hum of electronics, no distant sound of passing cars, only the occasional creak of timber above you and the slow shuffle of movement below. The ceiling is low. Beams of dark, hand-hewn wood run across it, warped just slightly from age and moisture. They weren't machine-made, clearly. You can still see the marks where tools carved them, uneven and human. A cobweb stretches from one corner to a timber knot. The spider isn't home. You try to sit up, but your body is stiff, your limbs heavy. You're not on a mattress. Not even close. Beneath the rough linen sheet is a sack of straw, flattened unevenly under your weight, lumpy in some spots, completely empty in others. As you move, you feel the sharp ends poke your back, dry stalks breaking audibly beneath you. Your feet are bare. The floor is packed earth, cool to the touch. You reach for the wall and feel rough stone, set in place with a chalky mortar that flakes under your fingers. There's no wallpaper, no paint, just age, texture, and the quiet smell of living. Somewhere nearby, a chicken clucks. You shuffle toward the door, more of a plank than a proper door, with uneven iron hinges and a single wooden latch. You lift it gently. It doesn't open smoothly. It groans. You pause. No one comes. Outside, the light is clearer now, though still dim. You're in a cottage, or something like it. A single room, a hearth against the far wall, a blackened pot hanging in the fireplace, motionless, no fire. Your clothes are strange, not your own, woolen, heavy, scratchy against your skin. The tunic hangs long, nearly to your knees, and smells faintly of smoke and something animal. Your legs are wrapped in cloth, bound with cords. You touch the coarse fabric of your sleeve. It feels wrong, like something between a blanket and a sack. Your breath is visible in the morning air. You notice a bundle of sticks in the corner, firewood. Beside it, a small bench, a wooden bowl, and a flat loaf of something hard. Bread. It looks old, dry. There's a knife beside it, but not one you'd recognize. The blade is blackened, uneven, chipped near the point, forged by hand. You step outside. The door sticks again, then gives way with a heavy sigh of wood. The light nearly blinds you, but only for a moment. It isn't bright, not in the way you're used to. The sun is climbing slowly behind a pale grey sky, filtered through mist and the smoke of many small fires. The world smells of ash, soil, and dung. You're standing in a village, not a town, not a city. A gathering of wooden homes, thatched with straw, the walls wattle and daub, twigs and mud. There are fences made of thin, crooked branches. A pig roots noisily in the dirt a few feet away. Two children, barefoot and pale, run past you without a glance. One carries a stick, the other laughs. Farther off you see a man swinging an axe into a tree stump. He glances toward you briefly, then looks away. No greeting, just work. You aren't sure if they know you're not from here, or if you look like one of them. There's no sign of technology, no cars, wires, roads, or streetlights, just mud paths and chimneys coughing smoke into the sky. You hear a bell, faint, metallic, distant, a church, maybe, or a signal to start the day. You step back inside. Your hands are trembling slightly, but you breathe deep and let the stillness settle over you. You look again at your surroundings, not as a stranger now, but as someone trying to understand. A straw bed, a wooden bench, a clay jug filled with water, a folded cloth that might be a towel, a hearth, cold, a pot, black with use, and on a low shelf, a single wooden cross, plain, carved by hand. You are in someone's home, and now it's yours. There is no mirror here. You don't know what you look like. But there's a bowl of water by the fire. You lean over it. The surface ripples slowly as you move. In it a face, tired, a little thinner than you remember, smudged with sleep. The air smells like last night's smoke and the day's first labor. Your stomach growls. You tear off a piece of the bread. It is hard, almost brittle, and tastes like sour grain and wood smoke. You chew slowly, each bite taking time. Outside, a cart rumbles past. Wooden wheels, a donkey brays. Somewhere, someone calls out in a language you almost understand. You sit on the edge of the straw bed. It crunches faintly beneath you. This will be your home tonight, and perhaps many nights after. The air is still cold. You pull the wool tunic tighter. You don't know what year it is, but the modern world is gone, and this is the beginning. Just a straw bed and stone walls. The roosters crow and the day begins. The rooster crows again, sharper this time, longer, like a trumpet made of feathers and habit. It doesn't just mark the hour, it commands it. Across the village, you can hear the reply, hens rustling in their coops, footsteps in dry leaves, the low whinny of a horse not yet harnessed. Morning has arrived, not all at once, but like smoke curling through the beams of every cottage. You step outside again. The air is still cool, but less biting now. The mist is beginning to lift, revealing the wet gleam of dew across every surface. The straw roofs sparkle faintly, catching light like golden threads. You hadn't noticed before how alive the morning is here, not with noise but with motion. In the distance, a woman stoops over a bucket, pouring yesterday's milk into shallow pans. Two children carry firewood toward the longhouse. Another boy walks a line of fence posts, checking the hemp twine that keeps the goats penned in. No one is still. No one has the luxury of delay. There is no clock, but everyone knows what time it is. The rhythm of the village doesn't come from machines or calendars. It comes from need, from hunger, from the weight of work that must be done before the sun reaches its peak, and far more that waits before it sets again. You hear a door unlatch behind you. A man emerges, older than you, bearded, shoulders bowed by labor. He nods once in your direction, not in greeting, but in silent expectation. He holds a wooden yoke in one hand, meant for shoulders, not oxen, and a small sack in the other. You realize you are expected to follow. You do. The two of you walk in silence down a muddy path, past low hedges and chicken tracks. You pass a cart sunk deep in the wheel ruts of yesterday's storm. No one will move it today, not until something more urgent is done. Somewhere behind you, another rooster crows. It sounds farther off now. You reach the fields just as the mist pulls back like a curtain. Acres of uneven land stretch ahead, already half awake, earth that was plowed last week. Earth waiting for seed, earth that doesn't care who you are or where you came from, only that you will dig and plant and wait. The man hands you the sack. Inside, dried beans, hard, dull brown, chalky. You take a handful and begin dropping them in rows, following the shallow furrows he drags with a crude wooden plow. He says nothing. There's no instruction, only task. Your back aches by the third row. By the fifth, you notice a rhythm in it. The way the sack shifts against your hip, the arc of your hand, the tiny whisper each beam makes as it tumbles into the earth. Not loud, not meaningful, just steady, like the day itself, like the breath of a world that keeps going without you. The sun rises higher, the chill fades, your wool tunic sticks to your skin in places. You notice, for the first time, the smell of the soil, not just mud, but the sharp living scent of turned ground, of worms, roots and everything that sleeps beneath. There's something ancient in it, something older than memory. Across the field, another family works, a woman and her daughter, bent over onions. The daughter is maybe 10. She glances up at you briefly, then back to her rows. Her fingers move quickly, practiced. She does not stop to rest. There is no shade here, no break room, just the sound of breath and birdsong, and the creak of the plow. Eventually, the man stops. He stands stretching his back, looking out over the work behind him. He squints into the sun, then reaches into his tunic and pulls out a small loaf of bread wrapped in cloth. He tears it in two and hands you the larger half. You nod. He does not speak. This is not generosity, this is necessity. You eat. The bread is coarse, but fresh, better than the one you found in the cottage. The crust is thick, cracked like old bark, but the inside is soft and warm. You chew slowly. Every bite feels earned. A jug of watered ale is passed between you, warm, bitter and flat. It dulls the dryness in your throat. No one expects more. And then without signal, the work resumes. This is morning in the medieval world, not a time of contemplation, not a ritual, not a peaceful sunrise walk with coffee and silence. This is survival. Daylight is time. Time is life. You glance at the sky and wonder how much of it is left. But there's a rhythm now, not just in the beans or the rows, but in the body. You feel it. The way your legs bend, the soft pull in your arms, the shift of weight between steps. Your hands are dirty, your knees ache, but you keep going. Not because you've been told to, because it's the only thing to do. You belong to the land now, just like everyone else, and still in the distance, the rooster crows again. Breakfast with barley and weak ale. The field is behind you now, not finished, but paused. You and the others return along the muddy path, feet caked in the land's memory. The sun has lifted just high enough to warm the tops of the hedges, and the smoke from the village chimneys rises in thinner threads, now steady, unhurried. Back inside the cottage, the air feels warmer. A small fire has been lit in the hearth, coaxed back to life from embers likely left glowing overnight. It crackles gently, feeding on kindling. A blackened pot hangs from its hook again, swaying slightly, as if it remembers the hand that placed it there. The woman who lit the fire sits nearby, kneading a lump of dough on a wooden board. Her hands move with quiet purpose. Press, fold, turn, press again. She doesn't look up as you enter. You are not unexpected. You are part of the shape of her day. On the table, such as it is, a plank atop two barrel stumps, rests a shallow wooden bowl filled with something thick and steaming. You recognize it vaguely. Barley, cooked slowly, perhaps all night, in water drawn from the village well. A handful of leeks have been added, thin and pale, likely pulled from the cold ground before sunrise. There is salt, but only barely. Salt is precious. Nothing is wasted here. Not heat, not light, not time. You sit. There are no plates, no spoons, either. Just the bowl, and a rough wooden ladle passed from hand to hand. You take your turn without a word. The barley porridge clings to the ladle in soft folds, steaming faintly in the morning air. You lift it to your lips. It tastes earthy, grain softened into something like glue, thick and filling. Not sweet, not seasoned, just warm and heavy, with the smallest bite from the leeks. It doesn't excite the tongue, but it quiets the belly, and that's all it needs to do. You chew slowly, letting the warmth settle in your mouth before swallowing. Each bite takes time, and in that time, the sounds of the village filter in again. A cow lowing, the clatter of a pail, the hollow knock of a wooden bucket against a well's edge. Life is already moving. A jug of weak ale is passed next, brown, flat, and slightly sour. You sip. It isn't pleasant, exactly, but it's safer than the water. Brewed from barley or oats, barely fermented, low in alcohol, just enough to kill what needs killing, and dull what needs forgetting. This is breakfast, and lunch, and perhaps dinner. There are no courses, no coffee, no menu, only what the earth gave yesterday, and what hands could make of it. The woman finishes kneading the dough. She lays the shaped loaves near the fire to rise, covering them with a cloth made from old flax. You notice her hands, chapped, knuckles cracked, fingertips rough, not from the cold, but from time, from labor, from living. A child enters, barefoot, hair tangled, still shaking off sleep. They sit beside the fire, and curl their arms around their knees. No words, only heat and silence shared between them and the flames. You look around and begin to see the rhythm, not just the work, but the slowness of it, the acceptance. Everything takes time, because nothing can be rushed. The barley doesn't boil faster for want of it. The fire doesn't burn hotter for pleading. You live by the pace the world allows. Outside, a bell rings again. Faint, the church tower, somewhere beyond the fields. A signal perhaps, or just the monks marking an hour that no one here has time to count. The woman glances toward the sound, but does not rise. She knows what it means. So do you. The fire pops gently in the hearth. A curl of smoke drifts upward and escapes through the chimney. The child by the fire leans back slowly and rests their head against the wall. Their eyes drift closed. The porridge is nearly gone. The jug is lighter. the day will resume. But for now there is a moment, bare, flickering and quiet, and in that moment, for the first time since you arrived here, you feel full. Oxen, mud, and the morning plough. The village never stops moving. It only shifts. As the sun stretches higher through the mist, the warm stillness of the hearth fades. It's time again. Not by clock, but by feeling, by light through the thatch, by footsteps on packed earth, by the soft groan of the world as it prepares to lift its weight. You step outside once more. The door creaks in protest, and the air meets your face with a gentle push, cool, but no longer cold. The morning dew clings to everything, turning the yard to a shallow bog. Chickens hop across stones, goats bleat softly in pens, and somewhere nearby, someone curses gently at a stubborn latch. A man passes you carrying a yoke, long polished by years of shoulder and sweat. He nods again. You follow again, this time toward the barn. It is a simple structure, timbers lashed together, roofed in straw, sided with mud and scrap. But it holds something precious. Inside, standing patient and immense, are two oxen, massive creatures. Their hides a patchwork of brown and black, their breath slow clouds of steam in the morning air. They stand without chains, without panic. They know their place in this day. The yoke is lifted and laid across their necks, leather straps pulled tight. The oxen grunt softly, hooves shifting in the straw. The man gestures, and you take hold of the plough, wooden, iron-tipped, heavy enough to fight you if your grip falters. The earth is waiting. You follow them out. The oxen move with a rhythm that's not yours, but older, ancient, slow, deliberate. Their hooves sink deep into the muddy path, pulling the plough behind them as if it were a forgotten branch. The wooden wheels of the cart beside the barn creak as someone else begins loading seed. You arrive in the fields. The smell of soil is stronger now, damp, living. The furrows from earlier shimmer with puddles. The path ahead is long, curved by the hill and bordered by hedges, where small birds flutter and vanish. The plough bites the earth. Your arms tense, back bowed slightly, the handles cold beneath your hands. The oxen begin to walk. The plough pulls through the dirt with a sound like a sigh, deep, wet, ancient. A groove opens behind you, the rich brown soil exposed like a secret pulled from sleep. You walk, step, pull, adjust. The earth is not soft, it fights you. The plough drags against roots, rocks, old scars from seasons past. Your arms ache. The oxen continue. They do not tire, or rather they do, but they do not complain. In the distance someone sings, a low wordless tune, carried just enough to be heard but not understood. Another field, another plough, a different man perhaps, or a woman. You can't tell, but their voice keeps a beat, not for joy, not for beauty, but for rhythm. A way to pace the body, when the body begins to tire. The mud is everywhere. It clings to your boots, your knees, your sleeves. It pulls when you walk, sucks when you step. It does not care about you, but it lets you pass. That's all it needs to do. A crow lands on the fence post nearby. It watches you, head tilted, feathers ruffled. You pause to catch your breath. The crow doesn't move. It waits, as if it has seen all this before, as if it will see it again. You look down at your hands, blistered already, the skin reddened where the wooden handles have rubbed. There are no gloves, no tools built for comfort. The plough is old, perhaps older than the man who owns it, but it still works. That's all that matters here. By mid-morning, you've crossed the field. The oxen breathe heavy, heads lowered. You run a hand along one of their flanks, warm, solid, patient. There is something calming in their presence, something that makes your own struggle feel shared, not suffered alone. You unhook the yoke. The oxen don't resist. They step back slowly, free but not in a hurry. They know they will be back tomorrow, and the day after. You turn and look at what you've done. The lines behind you are crooked, uneven, not the work of a farmer, not yet, but they are deep. The soil is turned. The earth in its way has accepted you, and for now, that is enough. The plough leans against the fence. The yoke hangs on a peg in the barn. A sparrow darts through the rafters above and disappears. The man who brought you here says nothing, but when he looks at you this time, he nods again. It's different now, not a greeting, a recognition. You belong to the work now, and the work belongs to the land. The rhythm of seasons and soil. The work stops, but the day does not. The sun hangs higher now, casting a softer gold over the village, warming the mud paths, just enough to make them slick. A small wind stirs the hedgerows. Birds leap from branch to branch, hunting for worms stirred by the plough. Somewhere behind you, an old dog barks once, then falls silent again. You sit for a moment near the fence that borders the fields. Your legs stretch forward, tired, covered in mud up to the knees. The warmth of the earth rises faintly beneath you. You run your hand along the dirt beside the post. It crumbles softly, damp, clumped in places, but not dead, not dry. This soil is old. It has memory. It has patterns. No one here writes them down, but everyone knows them. The rhythm of the year is not counted in numbers. It's felt, it's planted, it's harvested, it's endured. Behind you, someone sharpens a sickle. The sound of metal dragging against stone, over and over, slow, patient. The blade doesn't shine. It doesn't need to. It only needs to bite when called upon. You close your eyes for a moment, and in the quiet, the seasons drift past. First comes the waking, early spring. The frost breaks, the buds appear, the smell of the earth changes, from stillness to potential. Men dig, women scatter seeds, by hand. Children shoo birds from the rows, lambs are born. The air is damp and cold, but kind. Then comes the green summer rising. Crops stretch tall, weeds taller. Hands blister, backs ache, but the fields become dense with promise. Hay is cut and left to dry in sweet golden rows. Bees hum. The sun turns harsh, but it feeds what it threatens. After that comes the gather, harvest. The village is awake before dawn, scythes swinging, grain piled high in carts, heads low and hands fast. There are prayers that rain waits just one more day. There are songs, quiet ones. Every hand is needed, even the smallest. And then comes the wait, winter creeping in. The world slows. Wood is stacked. Animals are slaughtered, salted, smoked. The wind grows sharp. Smoke curls steadily from every chimney. The nights lengthen, and under snow or wet sky, the land sleeps, and again it begins. You're not sure what season you've landed in yet, but your hands already feel the memory of others. The people around you know where they are in the cycle. Even if they can't read, they read the land. There is no calendar in the cottage, no dates circled, only the color of leaves, the feel of the wind, the weight of the sun. A boy runs past you with a sack of seed over his shoulder. He trips, spills a handful, then scurries to gather it again. Not a grain must be lost. A bird watches nearby, waiting for what he forgets. You hear the voices of women near the well. Someone is pounding flax with a mallet. Somewhere, clothes are being washed in a wooden tub, grey water sloshing rhythmically. Even the washing has a season. Everything does. You rise again, slowly, your legs stiff, but obedient. The fields stretch out in front of you, rows uneven, but ready. Somewhere beyond them, beyond the ridge, there are other villages doing the same work, singing the same songs, bending to the same weather. You realize just how big this world is, without needing to go far, because the land decides the pace. Not kings, not bells, just soil and season. Back in the cottage, the hearth burns lower now. Bread dough rests beneath its cloth, rising slowly by the warmth. The room is quiet. Someone is napping in the corner, and outside the sky is shifting again. The wind leans east. The air smells of something distant, maybe smoke from another farm, maybe rain on its way. You don't know yet how to read those signs, but you will. You will feel the days change, not by date, but by weight, by silence, by birdsong. And in time, if you stay here long enough, you too will learn the rhythm of seasons and soil. A peasant's life is not their own. The village looks simple, but it is not free. You begin to notice it more now, not from words, but from the pauses, the glances, the silence, when footsteps approach. A man walks past in finer wool, mounted on a stocky horse, sword strapped to his side. No one meets his eyes. He does not stop to speak. He rides slowly, deliberately, and continues down the path that skirts the cottages and into the fields. That is the Lord's steward. He does not own the land, but he speaks for the one who does. The peasants here, your neighbors now, do not own their homes. They do not own the fields. They do not own their days. They borrow them, lease them, live within boundaries drawn by others, and payment is always due. It comes in sacks of grain, in hens handed over without protest, in hours of labor owed beyond the harvest, days spent mending fences, or clearing brush, or hauling stone to places that will never feed them. There is a word you begin to hear quietly among them, Dimesne. It refers to the land kept by the Lord for himself, worked not by his hand, but by yours. Even the time you spend in your own field, Your cottage plot, your narrow strip, is not truly yours. There are seasons when you are pulled away to plant for him, to weed for him, to carry his tools, repair his walls, dig his ditches, and when that work is done, you return to your own earth. Already tired, already behind. There are dues for the mill too. You can't grind your own grain without his stone, and the stone costs silver, or a portion of your flour. Even if your hands grew the wheat, you need his wheel to make it bread. The church also watches, not with weapons, but with parchment and tithes. 1/10 of what you grow, what you raise, what you catch, it belongs to God, and God, too, has stewards. You do not complain, not because you agree, but because it would change nothing. This world does not reward defiance, it remembers it. Quietly, sharply. A woman down the lane once spoke too loudly when her child went hungry. The steward made note, and that winter, when firewood was scarce, hers arrived last, just enough to smoke, not enough to warm. You begin to see the layers of power. They are not visible in crowns and thrones. They are felt in what you may not do. You may not leave without permission. You may not fish in the Lord's stream. You may not hunt the deer that pass through your own fields. That meat is not yours, even if your children are starving. There are rules even for marriage, even for baking bread in an oven that isn't yours, even for brewing ale, if it begins to sell. Everything has a hand above it. You see this most clearly when the steward returns later that day, with a list in hand. One by one, households are called. Dues are gathered. Not coins, few have coins. Instead, a chicken here, a bag of rye there, a day of service promised. No one argues. No one lingers. You watch a neighbor carry a bundle of wool to the steward's cart, then return home with her arms empty. Her face does not show anger, just the same practiced stillness as everyone else. Even the children sense it. They play, yes, but not when the steward is near, not loudly, not freely. Their games pause, their laughter fades, they wait, and once he is gone, the village exhales. You begin to understand this isn't cruelty, not openly, it's structure. A lattice of obligations, of expectations, of roles so deeply worn they no longer need explaining. You're not meant to rise above them, you're meant to disappear within them. That is the quiet contract of peasant life. You will sow, reap, serve, kneel, and die, and the land will not remember your name. You lie in bed that night, beneath the thatched roof and the fading warmth of the hearth, and listen to the sounds of the village settling. Somewhere, a dog barks, a baby cries, a pot is moved, softly. There is no laughter, only breathing, only stillness. And you realize something. This life does not belong to you. You are borrowing it, from the land, from the Lord, from history itself. The manor lord's dues. You don't see the Lord often, but you feel him everywhere. His name is spoken rarely, and only in whispers, more title than person, more shadow than man. His manor lies beyond the outer fields, behind a wooden gate that creaks only when summoned. Most villagers have never stepped inside its walls. They wouldn't ask to. The space between lord and peasant is not a matter of distance. It's law, it's blood, it's permanent. And yet, the manor makes its presence known all the time. You see it in the way heads bow when the steward passes, in the way grain is measured and carried to storehouses that are never yours, in the way time bends, days stolen from your own tasks, redirected to serve the lands and walls of someone you'll never truly meet. Today the bell tolls again. It is not the church bell, it is lower, slower, a single clang that means one thing. The Lord's dues are being gathered, and whether your belly is full or your barn is bare, the debt does not wait. You stand beside others in a long quiet line. Some carry sacks on their backs, others lead hens by cord or cradle baskets of rough-woven wool. Every item is counted twice, once by the steward and once by the scribe. A boy with ink-stained fingers, squinting at a ledger whose pages are stiff with years. Your turn comes. There is no room for mistake. The sack of barley in your arms is weighed, examined, recorded, noted beside a name that may or may not truly be yours. Names change here. Spelling is not fixed. Identity is more about presence than signature. You wait. The steward nods. The sack is added to the pile. You are given nothing in return, not even a word, but the look in his eyes tells you, for now you are in balance. You owe nothing more, today. Others are not so lucky. A man farther down the line brings only a half sack. His harvest was poor. The steward pauses, then speaks, low but sharp. The man nods once, twice, then lowers his head. A mark is made in the ledger. A fine will come later. Maybe a day of labor on the dim, maybe two. The debt is never erased, it is simply postponed. Back in the village, you hear someone muttering. Not anger, just weariness. We farm for them, and we eat what's left. The words drift on the breeze like fallen straw. No one replies. You begin to notice things. The best fields, the flattest, the richest, don't belong to the village. They belong to the manor. You see them, fenced and guarded by hedges, worked by teams of peasants on borrowed days. Crops from those fields are carted not to your cottages, but to distant markets, or into the great barn by the manor gate. The oxen too, some are yours, but the strongest are not. They wear finer yokes, they pull smoother carts, they rest beneath real roofs when rain comes. Even the tools, your plough is old, chipped, patched. The Lord's is iron bound, freshly sharpened, and used by those chosen to serve his fields first, and you begin to understand the design. It is not theft, not openly, it is order. The Lord protects the land, they say, keeps the peace, offers justice, and in return, he is owed, he is fed first, warmed first, sheltered first. In a world this fragile, peace has a price. No wars have come this year. No raiders, no tax collectors from some distant king demanding coin. The roads are quiet, the village sleeps, and so the Jews are paid without question. A bargain no one signed, but everyone honors. You see the manor once that week, from a distance across a stretch of golden grass. Its walls are higher than you imagined. The roof tiled, the windows real glass. Light catches on one and flashes like a star. Then the clouds pass, and it disappears behind a line of trees. You return to your cottage. The hearth is still warm. A crust of bread rests on the bench. You eat slowly, thinking not of hunger, but of weight. Not just the weight of labor, but the weight of living beneath something bigger, older, untouchable. You lie down that night, and dream of high stone walls, not as prisons, as boundaries. This life, you realize, is not just yours, it is rented, and the rent is always due. Children, games, and wooden swords. Not everything in the village is labor, not everything is debt. There is laughter too, but it comes softly, and at the edges of things, never loud enough to draw attention, never wild enough to seem wasteful. In the late afternoon, while the adults mend fences or patch shoes, the children gather near the pond. No one tells them to meet there, but they do. The water reflects the pale blue sky, ringed by reeds and soft patches of moss where frogs hide. It's shallow, warm in the sun, and ringed with smooth stones the children know by heart. They come barefoot, some with their tunics still damp from chores, others with mud caked up to their knees. They don't bring toys, not exactly, they make them. One child carries a stick, long and straight, shaved at the end to a dull point. Another has a bundle of twine, wound tightly around what might once have been a doll. Someone else has a pouch of stones, carefully selected, smooth and heavy, perfect for tossing. They play, not with structure, not with rules, but with imagination. A branch becomes a sword, a reed becomes a wand, the stump of an old fence becomes a dragon's lair. They duel, they chase, they fall and rise again without tears. You sit at a distance, unnoticed at first, and then one of them sees you. A boy, maybe 7, with bright eyes and a smudge of ash across his cheek. He doesn't speak, just holds up a stick and points it toward you, a challenge. The others freeze for a moment, then one girl laughs, and soon they're shouting again, not in fear, but in delight. You're swept into their game, a wandering knight, a forest beast, a lost king, whatever they decide, and for a time you forget the weight of the plough, the debt, the lord, the land. You are simply part of the story. They run in circles, they build a fort from branches and call it a castle. They invent rules on the spot. Whoever touches the stone first wins, whoever falls in the grass is a prisoner, whoever can balance longest on the log becomes the new lord. Their world is still soft, it has not hardened into survival yet, but you can see it coming. One boy watches the older men pass with heavy tools and pauses his game. Another girl ties her hair with a rag, like her mother. Even now they mimic work. Not because they understand it, but because it surrounds them. Childhood here is short, sweet, but brief. A small boy cries when he scrapes his knee. No one runs to comfort him. One of the older children pats his back once, then hands him a stick and points toward a pretend enemy. The boy blinks, then stands. The game goes on. There are no carved toys here, no books, no chalkboards, but there is learning. In the mud, in the stories, in the tiny decisions made beneath the wide sky. You notice the games follow certain patterns. They always begin with freedom, but they end with order. The sword is passed to the next in line. The firewood pile must be rebuilt. Someone plays the steward, someone else the baker. Even in play, the rhythms of duty begin to settle into their minds. And yet, they laugh. A kind of laughter that belongs only to those who have not yet been broken by weather or debt. Their clothes are worn, but their voices are clear. Their dreams, though small, are whole. As the sun dips lower, a bell rings in the distance. Evening chores call. One by one the children vanish, pulled back into the arms of parents, or the promise of warm porridge. The pond is still. The reeds sway. A frog croaks once, and then silence. You remain for a moment longer. A stick lies in the grass, worn at the handle, its point dulled by play. You pick it up, feel the weight, and smile. Even here, even now, children still make swords, still chase dragons, still dream of castles they'll never see. And for a moment, as you walk back toward your own cottage, you carry the stick at your side, just in case. Because in this world of order and stone, even a wooden sword can feel like freedom. Dreams in the fields. Evening comes slowly here. It does not fall, it gathers. The sun slips behind the hills without hurry, drawing longer shadows across the furrows of the field. The colors of the world shift, green to gold, gold to gray. Smoke from every hearth in the village rises now, curling soft into the sky like questions never asked aloud. You walk the edge of the fields alone. The ground is still warm beneath your feet, holding the day's heat like a memory. Small birds flit among the hedgerows. A hare darts away at your approach, vanishing into the tall grass without a sound. The only noises now are soft ones, boots in dust, leaves brushing in the wind, your own breath. It's peaceful, but never still. The fields never sleep, not truly. They hum with life too small to see. Roots shift beneath the soil, beetles climb stems, tiny moths float like ashes through the dusk. You can feel the world breathing, not with lungs, but with cycles. This is where the dreams live. Not the dreams of kings or banners or glory, but smaller dreams, real ones, earned ones. You pass a woman kneeling beside a row of beans, gently dusting the undersides of the leaves with her apron. She is checking for blight, for beetles, for signs that the crop will come. She doesn't look up. She's speaking softly to the plants, maybe, or to something deeper. A rhythm, a prayer. Her husband once dreamed of owning land, not much, just enough. A few acres with their name on it. He's gone now, fever or a fall. No one speaks it. But the beans grow still. That was his dream, and she keeps it warm like a coal in her palm. Farther on, two brothers lean on a fence, watching the sky shift from blue to lavender. They speak in murmurs, heads tilted, eyes fixed on nothing. You don't hear their words, but you feel them. Plans for next year's barley, hopes for fewer rats, maybe a borrowed ox, maybe not. Their dreams are measured in tools, in hours of rest that don't end in pain, in winters that pass without loss. You reach the edge of a small hill, and stop. The village below you is soft now, hazy in the dimming light. Lanterns flicker in windows, doors creak closed. A dog circles 3 times, then curls into itself beside a barn. Even the roosters have stopped their boasting. You sit, and you think about what it means to dream here. It is not loud, it is not grand. A good harvest, a healthy child, a winter with meat, a roof that doesn't leak. A day when no one calls your name in anger. These are not small things, not really. They are just quiet, and quiet things grow best in the soil. Your fingers find a clump of earth, soft and dark. You press it between your thumb and palm. It smells of rain, old roots, and patience. This land has known 1,000 dreams, planted and forgotten. Some sprouted, some didn't, but all of them mattered. The stars begin to appear now, one by one, with no fanfare, just presence. Distant, slow-burning witnesses. You wonder how many of the villagers have looked up and asked them for something, anything. How many wishes they've carried, like seeds caught in wind. You close your eyes for a moment, and there it is, a dream of your own. You don't know what shape it takes yet, but you feel it stirring, not for riches, not for escape, just belonging. A place at the fire, a name someone says with care, a field that answers when you tend it. You rise slowly, brushing dirt from your hands. Behind you the fields sway gently in the breeze. Ahead the village waits in twilight silence, holding its breath before the long stillness of night. You walk toward it, footsteps light, heart quieter than it was this morning, because now you know, even in mud and under sky, dreams take root, and in time, if you're careful, they grow. A boy named William. His name is William, or sometimes just Will. He's about 8, maybe 9, though no one keeps careful count. His birthday isn't marked by candles or cakes, but by the season the barley was tall, and his mother said he'd grown too fast for last year's tunic. You meet him first by the pond, skipping stones. He doesn't say much, just looks up with curious eyes and hands you a flat stone, smooth grey, the perfect shape for flight. He shows you how to flick your wrist, how the angle matters more than strength. Your stone skips once, maybe twice. His skips 4 times. He grins, proud without gloating. Later you find him near the fire, helping his mother crush herbs with a stone pestle. He leans into the motion, tongue peeking from the corner of his mouth in concentration. The herbs are for a poultice, she says, something for a cousin's bad tooth. William listens, watching carefully, storing the recipe in his mind. He is always watching, not for mischief, not out of boredom, but because this world does not explain itself. It must be learned by mimicry, by repetition, by listening to the way the grown-ups mutter when the weather shifts or how they pause at the sound of hoofbeats. Will knows what every rope in the cottage does. He knows how to tell spoiled milk from good. He knows which berries stain your fingers and which stain your stomach. He asks questions too, quiet ones, when no one else can hear. Do you think the trees talk when no one's there? Why do grown-ups always look tired, even when they're sitting? Have you ever seen a knight? A real one, with metal shoes? You smile. He grins back, gap-toothed and mud-smeared. Then he's off again, chasing chickens or balancing along a fence post like it's the edge of a castle wall. He has a stick sword, of course. Every child here does, but his is wrapped in twine, and he's carved a little crossguard into the handle. He says it's a relic from the Great War, though no one's sure which war he means. There are always wars, but William doesn't care about history. His war is against the wind, and the brambles, and his friend Thomas who cheats at pretend duels. He wants to be a knight someday, not because he understands the politics or the burden, but because he's seen drawings in a travelling peddler's book once, and he remembers the armour, the horse, the respect. He dreams of a banner with a wolf on it. He doesn't know why. His mother says they'll never leave this village. She says William will grow tall, take a plot of land, marry someone from 3 cottages over, and raise barley like his father and grandfather. She says this while braiding his hair back from his face, and he says nothing. But you see the look in his eyes, not rebellion, not even disappointment, just distance. That night by the fire, William sits beside you, legs crossed, eyes heavy. The rest of the cottage is quiet, the adults asleep or nearly so. He speaks without looking at you. Do you think the stars know who we are? You wait a moment before answering. I think they remember what we hope for. He nods once, then with no further questions, he curls into a bundle of wool and sleep. You watch him breathe, a boy named William. A story still unfolding, and you wonder if you stay long enough, will he remember you? Will he speak of the stranger who knew how to skip stones, who spoke of stars, who never quite belonged? Or will you become part of the blurred edge of memory, like the nights in songs, like dreams he can't quite name when morning comes? Either way, his story will continue. In mud, in laughter, in calloused hands and stargazing questions. And maybe, just maybe, one day he will look at the horizon and go. William's chance and the Lord's favour. It begins with a knock, not on a door, but on a fence post. 3 firm raps from the steward's riding crop. William is in the yard when it happens, trying to teach a chicken to follow him with a trail of grain. He stops mid-step, looks up, and freezes. The steward never comes this close without reason. The man doesn't dismount, he simply waits, watching the cottage door until William's mother steps out, wiping her hands on her apron, eyes cautious. The message is simple. The Lord is holding a hunt next week. Nothing grand, just a local outing with a few guests and hounds. They require 2 boys from the village to run ahead, Flush game from the brush. Fast runners. Quiet feet. Willing ears. William has been chosen. Or more truthfully, offered. A favor. Or a command. The steward rides off before questions can form. That night, the cottage is quieter than usual. No one says no, but no one quite says yes either. William sits beside the hearth, legs pulled up to his chest, eyes flickering with something you can't quite name. Pride? Fear? Both? His mother braids his hair tighter than usual. She murmurs something about behaving, about watching, about not speaking unless spoken to. His sister gives him a lump of beeswax to chew, says it helps calm the breath when you run long. No one says it aloud, but everyone knows. This is a test, and the Lord may be watching. The morning of the hunt is silver and damp, mist clings to the grass. The dogs bark sharp and eager. The hunters wear wool trimmed with fur, their boots too fine for mud. The Lord himself doesn't speak to William, but nods once when the steward points him out. That's all it takes. A nod, a flicker of attention. William's task is simple. Run ahead of the hounds, rustle bushes, shout softly into thickets, flush the pheasants and hares. He does it well. His feet are quick, his eyes sharp. He knows these woods better than any noble could. But it's not the running that earns their notice. It's what happens near the ridge. One of the Lord's dogs darts off trail, chasing a scent, vanishing into the deeper scrub. The nobles call out, annoyed. The boy beside William stumbles, unsure. But William runs, not toward the dog, but the path he knows it will take. He cuts across an old stone wall, leaps over a rivulet, and catches the hound by its collar, just before it slips into the marshy bog beyond. He whistles, a short, practiced note, and the dog stills. When he returns, mud-streaked and panting, the steward blinks once. The Lord watches him for a long moment, then turns away without a word. But later, when the hunt ends and the game is tallied, William is given a crust of fine bread from the manor's stores. It is not much, but it is not nothing. He carries it home like treasure. His mother breaks it into 4 pieces. They eat it slowly, with care, each bite savored more than any feast. William does not boast, but that night, he polishes his stick sword until it shines dull in the firelight. You sit beside him, and he finally speaks. He saw me, he whispers, barely above the crackle of the flame. Not just the dog, me. You nod. Because it's true. And that, in this world, is no small thing. For a boy with no land, no title, no future beyond the fields, a single glance from the manor can feel like a door left slightly ajar. He may never walk through it, but now he knows it exists. And that knowing, that flicker of possible, is the beginning of every quiet rebellion ever born in a peasant's heart. Squires and swordplay. Every boy in the village knows the stories of ironclad knights and golden spurs, of dragons slain and banners flying, of swords too heavy for cowards and horses that never stumble. And every boy in the village, at least once, believes that he might become one. But knights don't come from places like this. Not often. Not really. They come from bloodlines and favors, from castles and courts, from families whose names are written, not just spoken. Still, the dream persists, floating through muddy fields and thatched roofs like wood smoke. Even William holds it in his hands like a secret, polishing his stick sword when no one is looking, sparring with shadows behind the barn. One morning, a real knight arrives, not with fanfare, not with trumpets, but dust-covered and quiet. His armor is dulled by use, cloak torn at the hem, boots worn from leagues of hard riding. He's no storybook figure, but when he dismounts in the village square, every child stares like the sun has landed. He's come for bread, or barley, or perhaps news from the manor. No one knows. He speaks little, but the steward treats him with deference, and that says enough. William watches from the edge of the square, half hidden behind the trough. The knight notices. Later that day, he speaks to the steward, a passing remark perhaps. The boy watches like a hawk, and the steward, perhaps out of boredom, or something softer, sends William to the stable, to carry water for the knight's horse. William returns with mud on his sleeves, straw in his hair, and eyes bright like stars. He let me hold his sword, he whispers that evening. Just for a moment. It was too heavy, the grip worn smooth, the crossguard shaped like a wing. The sword is not magic, but it is real, and in that moment, something shifts. William begins to train more seriously. No one tells him to. There are no schools, no instructors, no pages of instruction, just memory, imitation, and the slow shaping of strength. He swings his stick in measured arcs. He watches the older boys wrestle, learning balance, learning when to wait and when to lunge. Sometimes he asks you to spar. You accept. You're careful. He notices. Don't go easy, he says. I want to learn. And so, you teach him what little you know. Not the flourish of nobles, but the basics. Footwork, grip, the balance between tension and readiness. He listens like someone starving. You watch him grow. Not taller, not yet, but steadier. When he carries the water pail now, it no longer sloshes. When he runs, it's with purpose, not play. His eyes linger on details, knots, boots, stances, the things others miss. You ask him once, do you want to be a knight? He shrugs, then nods, then shakes his head. I want to be chosen. The word lingers, because that's what knighthood means here. Not just armor or rank, but being lifted, named, seen, a path upward, in a world built flat. A door in a wall, no one else admits is there. But William also learns something else, that knighthood is not all glory. He overhears two travelers speaking near the blacksmith's fire, quiet, grim. One had served as a squire. He speaks of wounds that never healed right, of blood rusting in chainmail, of loyalty paid with cold thanks and colder beds. He says the worst part is not the pain, but knowing you are armor for someone else's war. William hears. He does not flinch. He does not stop training. But he no longer speaks of dragons. He speaks of discipline, of honor, of patience. In time, he makes a new sword, still wood, but better, straighter, weighted, balanced with a stone tied to the hilt. He doesn't name it. He says it hasn't earned a name yet. One morning, before dawn, you find him alone in the pasture, swinging in silence. The mist curls around him, each movement cutting through the quiet. He is not pretending anymore, not playing. He is practicing, preparing. And somehow, you feel he's closer than most ever get. Not to knighthood, perhaps, but to something rarer, a life shaped not by birth, but by will. The path ahead of William is still narrow, still muddy, still barred by walls he cannot yet climb. But he walks it anyway, sword in hand, eyes forward, chosen, if only by himself. The Duke of Normandy takes notice. The village has never seen a banner like this before. It arrives at dawn, stitched with gold thread, rippling above a train of horses whose hooves stir dust from roads that haven't felt such weight in generations. The riders wear fine wool and heavy cloaks, their boots spotless, their faces drawn. This is not a royal procession, but it is close. The Duke of Normandy is passing through, no one quite knows why. Some say he rides north to speak with the king. Others whisper of a dispute with another lord, about borders, or grain, or marriage. The truth never trickles down clearly. But the presence of the Duke's men is undeniable, and in a village where change moves slower than clouds, this is thunder. The steward is already waiting. When the train arrives, he bows, mutters deference. He has prepared the manor for a night's rest, fresh hay in the stables, wine warmed by the hearth, bread baked with the last of the fine flour. All of it offered without question. The villagers watch from doorways, heads lowered, words caught behind teeth, but not William. He doesn't speak, he doesn't step forward, but he watches with the same quiet hunger he has always had, standing just behind the fence post, stick sword resting on his shoulder, eyes fixed not on the Duke, but on the men behind him. Because among the riders are knights, not just one, but four. Their armor is darkened by use, their swords glint with polish, their horses are taller than anything the village has ever raised. They speak little, but their presence speaks for them. They are not the storybook knights of a child's dream. They are real, quiet, sharp-edged. The steward notices William's gaze. Perhaps he remembers the boy from the hunt, or perhaps he's simply looking for ways to impress. Either way, the words are spoken. That one, the steward says, nodding toward William, is quick, strong legs, loyal, clever, saved one of your dogs, sire. The Duke of Normandy doesn't turn his head, but his eyes flick toward the boy. It is the smallest glance, but William sees it, feels it, as if the air around him has shifted. Nothing is said aloud, no invitation is offered, but the knight beside the Duke, older, eyes like flint, rides forward and stops his horse a pace from the boy. You, he says, ever serve at table? William hesitates, then nods. Yes, sir. Ever sharpen a blade? Yes. Ever hold your tongue when you want to speak? A pause, then quieter. Yes. The knight studies him for a moment, then turns away, Nothing more, no praise, no promise. But later, when the men dismount at the manor, William is summoned, told to help carry firewood, told to scrub the boots, told to stand still, eyes down, and wait beside the door if he's needed, and he does. For hours, he stands with perfect posture, says nothing, watches everything. One of the squires eyes him warily, another scoffs at his worn boots. But the knight who spoke to him earlier, he says nothing, just watches. That night the Duke dines by the hearth. The manor is filled with warmth, laughter, tension. William stands in shadow, unseen, or so it seems, until the Duke says quite suddenly, without looking, "Leave the boy here, we ride at dawn." No one speaks for a long time. Then the steward bows. William says nothing. Later, back at the cottage, his mother doesn't cry, but she wraps him in her arms a little longer. His sister gives him her best ribbon. His brother says nothing, but won't meet his eyes. And in the morning, just before sunrise, William climbs up behind the supply wagon, and is gone. No parade, no promise, just a new road, and a glance from a man whose word can change the shape of a boy's life. The crownless claimant. The boy is gone. The cart that carried him vanished into the mist. 2 mornings passed, and the village has already begun to fold around the absence. Softly, like cloth pressed into the shape of a basket that is no longer there. His name still lingers, but less often now. One child whispers it by the pond. His sister smooths the earth where he once swung his stick sword. His mother stares longer at the fire before sleep, but most go on, because they must, and into the space he leaves behind, something else begins to grow. A story, not from the steward, not from the church, from the mouths of those who never saw the Duke's banner, but heard of it third hand, told between baskets of laundry and mouthfuls of porridge. They say the Duke saw something in him, a spark, a bearing, a bloodline. They say the boy had a mark on his shoulder, a birth sign, maybe, or a scar in the shape of a crown. They say a nursemaid once whispered that his father wasn't from this village, wasn't even from this country. A nobleman in disguise, a knight without a title, a fugitive prince. They say many things. Most don't believe them, but no one fully dismisses them either, because the story is warm, and in a place where truth is often cold and grey, warmth is more welcome than fact. An old man near the far well claims to remember a rebellion, years ago, long before any child was born. A fire, a flight, a babe hidden in the arms of a common woman. He says it with the voice of one who knows better than to believe himself, but still longs to be right. A girl of 10 ties a piece of cloth to a fence post, red, for courage. She says it's William's banner now. No one takes it down. The priest, when asked, only shakes his head. God chooses kings, not rumor. But even he speaks the boy's name more softly now. You hear all of it, and you wonder. You saw the boy run not from fear, but toward the hound. You saw the way he stood when the knight questioned him. You saw how he listened, how he practiced, how he waited without complaint. And you begin to realize something. Whether he has royal blood or not, doesn't matter. He acted like someone who did, and in a world ruled by stories, that's sometimes enough. One evening, as the sun drops behind the trees, you walk the same path William once took toward the ridge. The air smells of dry hay and wood smoke. Crickets sing in the grass. You find his old stick sword lying in the weeds, weathered now, bleached by sun, and softened by rain, but still whole. You lift it once, hold it in both hands, then press it gently into the earth beneath an oak tree. A marker, not of fact, but of belief. And you wonder if William ever returns. What will he be? A knight, a servant, a soldier lost in someone else's war, or something rarer, a man who learned how to rule without ever needing a crown. Because sometimes, the greatest claim is not what you're born with, it's what you carry, what you choose, and what others remember when you're gone. Across the channel, towards war. The sea is not close. Not from here, but in the stillness before dawn, when the wind is just right and the trees are silent, you can almost smell the salt. And that's when you know something is changing. Not here exactly, but near enough to matter. News does not travel fast in the village. It comes slowly, like everything else. Stitched into the hems of travelers' cloaks, murmured over broken bread by monks on pilgrimage, scratched into the memories of peddlers and mercenaries who speak of kings the villagers will never see. And lately, all the news comes from across the water. They call it the Channel. a narrow strip of sea that separates one crown from another. On maps, it looks like a gap in a smile. In truth, it's a border soaked in old rivalries, trade, and blood. The Duke of Normandy, yes, that same one, has raised more banners, more horses, more steel. Some say he means only to defend his lands. Others say he has his eye on something brighter, a throne. And if the whispers are true, then war is coming. Not here, not in these fields, but it will pass through, like thunder in the distance. It shakes the ground whether or not the lightning strikes. William, the boy from the village. He's gone with the Duke now. No one knows exactly where. But someone heard from someone who heard from someone else that the Duke's men have begun training squires for a crossing, that ships are being built, that the Duke's voice now holds the weight of destiny. The villagers speak of it in hushed tones. At the edge of the barley fields, a man says it plain. They'll sail soon, and when they do, they won't all come back. Another nods, tightening a bootlace. Storm's been building for years. You don't stack swords like that for nothing. Even the steward seems more solemn. He checks the granary twice, orders repairs to the manor's fences, sends the messenger boy downriver more often than usual. You begin to notice changes. Horses are quieter. Blacksmiths busier. The priest prays longer at the altar, lips moving in silence as candles burn lower than before. One morning, you hear the church bell toll, not for a birth or a death, but just to toll, a warning without words. And always that feeling in the wind, something moving, something vast. You remember the boy, how he swung his wooden sword like it meant something, how he spoke of being chosen. Maybe he has been. Maybe he's across the sea already, staring at white cliffs from the deck of a creaking ship, not knowing if his story will end in glory or be lost in the surf. And yet for all the talk of war, the village stays much the same. The pigs still grunt, the hens still peck, the sun still rises, as if it's never heard of kings or invasions or lines drawn on maps. The barley still bends with every breeze, but the people move a little faster now, speak a little softer, listen a little longer to distant hooves. Because war doesn't knock politely. It whispers first, then marches, then consumes. And for now the whisper is loud enough. The shield wall holds. They say the sky was grey that morning, not storm grey, not rain grey, just dull, like ash pressed over the world. A silence before something breaks, the kind of light that makes everything feel heavy, even breath. And beneath that sky, in a land far from the village, the shield wall stood. Not a wall of stone, not a thing built with mortar or tools, but of men. Flesh, wood, iron, breath and fear packed shoulder to shoulder. William is among them now. He has no banner, no coat of arms, no polished armor, just a dented helm, a tunic too short, and a spear that shakes slightly in his hand. He has waited for this moment for weeks, trained for months, imagined it longer than he can remember. But nothing prepares you for the sound. The rumble of hundreds of boots over wet earth, the creak of leather straps, the war cries, yes, but also the silence between them, a silence not of peace, but of breath, held too long, of futures shrinking to a single heartbeat. The shield wall is not beautiful, it is a tangle of men pressed so close their elbows bruise, their knees knock, their eyes flick left and right and never forward, because forward is the unknown, forward is death. Forward is what comes when the other side decides it's time. They wait. A command is shouted. Sharp, clipped, foreign-sounding. William doesn't understand the words, but he knows the meaning. The spears come down, shields brace, feet root deeper into the mud. No one moves. Then they see them. Across the field, horses, glinting helms, banners that whip and snap like living things. The enemy, not monsters, not shadows, just men. Men like them. But faster, stronger, perhaps hungrier. It doesn't matter. They are coming. The first sound is not a scream, but a thud, a single arrow striking wood, then another, then many, and then the crash. When the lines meet, it is not clean, it is not gallant or noble, it is chaos soaked in sweat and panic. William's shoulder drives into the back of the man in front of him. A spear tip flashes past his eye, his shield rattles, something splinters. He doesn't think. He just moves. They were taught to hold, not to win, not to chase, just hold. The shield wall bends, it groans, it cracks, but it does not fall. A man stumbles beside him. William shifts, fills the gap. He doesn't shout, doesn't cry, just presses forward with all he has, every muscle straining. every breath burning. Time blurs. Faces become blots of mud and blood. Steel clangs against wood. A scream rises. Someone falls. Someone else takes their place. Still the wall holds, and then, as suddenly as it began, it is over. Not victory, not quite, but a pause, a breath. The enemy retreats. The line does not break. Men sag against each other. Some drop their shields. Some drop to their knees. William stands barely. His arm shakes. His lips bleed. He blinks slowly, as if waking from a dream that weighs more than waking life. A knight passes down the line, checking, nodding, saying nothing, and William, mud-streaked, exhausted, still breathing, realizes something. This is not the end. This is the beginning, because the wall will be needed again, tomorrow, or the next day, or the one after that. And when it comes, he will be there, not because he was born to it, but because he stood once and did not fall. No one tells stories about the shield wall. They tell stories about kings and charges, and last stands, but the shield wall is what holds the kingdom. Not glory, not banners, just men who refuse to step back, and today, William was one of them. A fatal arrow in the eye. There's no trumpet that marks the moment a crown changes heads, no lightning strike, no voice from the sky, just the sound of a single bowstring, and the silence that follows. The battlefield has long since been soaked, trampled, marked by boots and hooves, and the long shadows of men who did not rise when the horns called retreat. No one knows which archer fired it. Not for sure. It might have been a trained longbowman, eyes sharp and hands steady, or a young man shaking with fear, loosing arrows into the grey sky, because he didn't know what else to do. No one will ever know the truth, but they know what happened. One arrow, one arc, one moment. The King of England, Harold, son of Godwin, was struck. Some say it pierced his eye, others say it found his chest, or his thigh, and the rest was confusion. But the story remains, carved into stone and thread and memory. A fatal arrow, a crown lost, a conquest begun. For William the boy, not the Duke, there is no fanfare, no roar of triumph. He doesn't even know what has happened, until long after the fighting is over. He stands at the edge of the battlefield, shield lowered, blood dry on his sleeve, as word filters through the ranks like water through gravel. The king is dead. No one says it with joy. No one says it with sorrow. They just say it flat, factual, final. William doesn't know what to feel. He has never seen a king, never heard his voice, never touched the hem of his cloak, but he knows this. The arrow that found its mark has changed everything. The Duke, they say, is now more than a duke. He is a conqueror, and perhaps, if no one stops him, a king. Men around the campfire speak in low voices. Some are already calling him William the Bastard, no more. Some call him William the Lucky, and a few, just a few, say William the Conqueror. The boy hears his name in that title, not for himself, exactly, but as a reflection, as if part of him is now tied to something larger, something he never asked for, but cannot leave behind. He did not fire the arrow. He did not choose the war, but he is in it now, stitched into the seams, and somewhere across the sea, in the village of his birth, they may never know what happened. They may never hear that their William stood near a moment that split the ages. They may only know that he left, and did not return. The arrow that killed the king did not just end a life, it opened a door, and doors, once opened, do not close the same. So the boy sits in silence, staring into the coals. His sword lies across his knees. His hand rests on the hilt, not gripping it, just remembering that it's there. The sky above is wide and empty, no stars tonight, just mist, and somewhere far beyond it, a crown waits to be placed on a new head. But for now the battlefield sleeps, and the boy who holds no title, no claim, no bloodline, remains, quiet, steady, breathing, still part of the story, even if no one writes him into it. A crown won in blood. The battlefield does not forget, not when the last arrow falls, not when the last prayer is whispered, not even when the crows have had their fill, and the banners have been folded away. The earth remembers, because it has been asked to hold too much. It holds the boots of men who never meant to become soldiers. It holds the broken shaft of the fatal arrow, and now, it holds the path of a crown dragged through blood. William the Duke, not the boy, is still standing, not unscathed, but upright. They say he walked the field at dusk, after the clash had ended, his cloak soaked from mist and marrow alike, not to gloat, not to weep, but to understand what he had done. what he had won. The throne is his now, in name, if not yet in peace. The nobles will fight. Perhaps the bishops will deliberate. The scribes will scratch new lines into the record. But the ground itself, the churned, red, still smoking ground, has already declared it. The crown belongs to him, because no one else is left to claim it. They bring it to him, not in a palace, not in a hall, but in a tent, wrapped in wool, smeared with ash from the fire. It's heavier than expected. No gems, just iron, gold, and history. He does not lift it to his head, not yet. Instead, he hands it to a servant, a quiet boy, young, mud still on his boots, sword still at his side. William, the other William, takes the crown in both hands. He does not try it on. He simply looks at it, close enough to see the tiny dent at the band's edge, close enough to see the seam where it was once broken, then mended, close enough to know that it is not just a prize, it is a burden. He wonders if the king who died ever held it like this, so near, so silent, so afraid. Around the camp, songs begin to rise, rough voices, made bold by victory and mead. They sing of destiny, of the duke's strength, of a kingdom now united beneath one man's will. But William hears none of it. He hears only breath, and wind, and the echo of hooves across fields, long quiet. The new king will ride to London soon. There will be a coronation, a feast, oaths sworn on altars, coins stamped with a new face. The people may kneel, or they may rebel, it doesn't matter, not yet. The crown is his now, but that doesn't mean it belongs to him, because every crown is borrowed from the dead, and the interest it demands is steep. The boy places it back down, gently, reverently, on the cloth where it came. He doesn't speak, he simply turns, walks to the tent's flap, and steps out into the cold night, back into the fog, back into the world where most of us live, not as kings but as witnesses. The battlefield behind him begins to fade into shadow, but the shape of the crown remains in his mind, heavy, unearned, and forever tied to the sound of men falling. The first Norman king. The roads are quiet now, not with peace, but with exhaustion, the kind of stillness that comes after shouting, after marching, after blood has cooled on mail and boots. And somewhere along those muddy tracks, lined with bare trees and half-frozen streams, rides a man who was once a duke. Now he is more, not by birth, not by marriage, not by the grace of an unchallenged bloodline, but by conquest. They call him King William now, William the First, King of England by sword, by vow, by necessity. But no one speaks the title with ease. Not yet. Even among his own men, there is a strangeness to it, as if the words do not quite fit in the mouth. The English do not yet kneel, and many of the Normans are still waiting for more land, more gold, more promises fulfilled. But the truth is this, there is now a Norman crown on an English head, and that changes everything. The boy William, who once stood behind the manor fence, dreaming of swords and stars, rides now behind the king's household, not at the front, not in the rear, somewhere in the middle, where squires and messengers and half-sworn knights drift like embers caught in the wind of something larger. He does not speak much, but he watches, he listens, and he begins to understand what a crown truly is. It is not just power, it is weight, because now every village passed, every toll gate ignored, every church bell rung differently, echoes with fear or defiance or silence too deep to name. The king himself says little. He rides with his head forward, eyes scanning the horizon. His beard is darker now, trimmed, his armor polished, but less adorned than one might expect for a monarch. At night, in the king's tent, men speak of building, of law, of the language problem, of land disputes that will take generations to settle, of abbots who refuse to acknowledge him, of nobles who will need silencing, quietly or otherwise. The crown is here, but the kingdom is not yet his. It must be shaped, hammered, and perhaps burned. The boy sees the maps, sees how many villages do not yet know they've been conquered, sees the cold look in the steward's eye as he draws circles around the north, sees how easily the new king brushes his finger over forests, towns and coastlines like they are pieces on a game board. But William, young William, remembers those places, remembers the pond, the stick sword, the soft voice of his mother braiding his hair before the hunt. He says nothing, but the memory stays. When they finally arrive in London, it is not to cheers, it is to uncertainty, to guarded faces peering from behind shutters, to churches half-lit and bells rung with hesitation. But the coronation must happen. The abbey is cold that morning. The crowd inside is packed, the air thick with the scent of wax, wool, and worry. Norman guards line the walls. English nobles shift in place, some clutching prayer beads, others fists, and when the archbishop lifts the crown, for a moment no one breathes. Then the voices begin. Long live the king. Some say it with loyalty, others with resignation, but the words fill the air like a storm rolling in from the sea, and William, King William, kneels, not in humility, but in ceremony, because even conquerors must kneel before they rise. The crown is placed on his head, the sword offered, the orb, the scepter, symbols of rule, forged in silence and sealed in blood. The boy watches from the back of the abbey. He is not asked to step forward, no one names him, no one sees him, but he knows in that moment that he is part of it, not in blood, but in breath. The king rises, and England changes, not overnight, not completely, but the first Norman king now walks her halls, and the world will never be the same again. The language of conquest. The war is over. At least, that's what the scribes will write. The king is crowned. The nobles have sworn. The banners hang in still air. But conquest doesn't end when the last arrow is loosed. Sometimes, it begins there. Because the deepest kind of conquest isn't done with blades. It's done with words. And now, in the halls of manors, in the scribbled parchments of monasteries, in whispered prayers and loud commands, another war begins. The war of languages. Norman French, Anglo-Saxon English, Latin from the church. 3 tongues now twine around the same stone hearths, and only one is spoken by kings. In the court, orders are given in French, decrees written in Latin. Commoners still speak their old English, but they are being rewritten without knowing it. A cow in the field is still CU, but on the Lord's table, it is beef. The animal remains English. The meal becomes French. The ploughman sweats in English. The clerk records it in Latin. The taxman translates it to Norman law, and through it all something shifts. The boy William, now grown enough to understand, hears the difference. In the stables, in the kitchens, in the throne room, he hears how the tongue of power curls softly but firmly around each command. He hears how the old words begin to fray, not all at once, but steadily. The village where he was born still speaks as it always has. But now they receive letters they can't read, pay taxes to names they can't pronounce, answer to laws written in ink, thicker than the truth. At first the villagers don't notice, then they notice everything. A reeve replaced by a bailiff, a toll raised with no explanation, a local priest suddenly preaching with a foreign accent, and always the scrolls, more scrolls, with more words they cannot read. The people do not resist, not openly. They grumble, they bargain, they adapt, and in time, without even knowing it, they begin to borrow the conqueror's words, not out of reverence, but out of need. Because when your child is born, you need someone to write their name. When your field is taxed, you need someone to count the measure. And when your king speaks, you need someone to tell you what he said. So the words arrive like seeds. At first foreign, odd, but then they take root, and soon what you speak is no longer what your grandparents knew. It is something new, something heavier, something that carries the weight of conquest in every syllable. Court, justice, army, noble, prison, peace. French words, now yours. But here's the secret, language cuts both ways. Because while the conquerors press their words into the soil presses back. The French becomes rougher, the Latin more tangled, the English more stubborn, and what emerges, years later, centuries later, is neither one nor the other. It is all of them. A patchwork tongue, sharp, wide, unruly, made by the conquered and the conquerors alike. It is the tongue of merchants and minstrels, of queens and cooks. It is what the boy William now speaks, half memory, half invention. It is the language of England, and though it was born in conquest, it survives because of those who had no choice but to bend it. The lords and their new lands, they began to arrive in spring, not all at once, and not with armies. Those had already passed through. These men came with wagons and wax seals. They wore cloaks of fine wool and boots that had not walked far on English mud. Their voices were different, rounder, quicker, their gestures sharp, confident. They were not here to fight, they were here to take possession. The king, their king, had granted them land. Land taken from English nobles who had backed the wrong cause, or from the church, or simply parcelled out from what had no clear claim. It didn't matter. The names had changed, the borders redrawn, And so, the new lords came to see what was theirs. They rode into villages where no one knew them. They stood in halls that had once belonged to men with old Saxon names. They pointed at maps and fields and storehouses and said, "This is mine now." Some brought their own stewards, others replaced the reeves and bailiffs who couldn't speak their language. A few tried to be gentle, or at least polite. Most did not. For the people in the villages, nothing had changed, and everything had changed. The thatched roofs still leaked in the same places. The oxen still pulled the same ploughs. The harvest still depended on the same clouds. But now, when dues were collected, the words used were different. The weight of the coin expected was heavier, and when they protested, there was no one left to hear them, because the old earls were gone, dead, exiled, imprisoned. The abbots who once mediated disputes now kept their eyes lowered. Even the steward, once confident and proud, now bowed deeper, spoke more softly, and translated the villagers' words into French before passing them on to the lord. In one village, the new lord ordered the manor house torn down and rebuilt in stone. It took 3 summers, and half the men in the area were pulled from their fields to cut, lift and haul. The finished house was strong, cold and taller than anything they'd seen before. It had arrow slits instead of windows. No one was allowed inside. He didn't live there full time. Most of them didn't. These Norman lords had other estates, other lands and castles farther south or across the sea. But they came to collect, to remind, to show the people who ruled now. One lord, perhaps out of pride, perhaps out of suspicion, banned the local feast day, said it was too pagan, too wild. The villagers obeyed, publicly, but they held their celebration in secret, in the woods, with less singing and more silence. Still, they danced, just once, then walked home in the dark. Some villagers adjusted. They learned just enough French to get by, learned how to flatter, how to nod at the right time, how to avoid being noticed. A few even gained favor, named as foresters, guards or scribes. Others never accepted it. Not allowed. Not with open defiance, but in how they plowed the land more slowly when the lord's men passed, in how they whispered the old names for things, in how they remembered who the land had truly belonged to. Years passed, and the lords stayed. New generations were born. The children of Norman fathers and English mothers, bilingual, clever, neither here nor there. They inherited both the weight of conquest and the soil of the conquered. By then it no longer mattered who first held the charter. The land had been reshaped, not just by war, but by rules, rents and routine. The conquerors had settled in, and the people they ruled had learned to live beneath them, not as equals, not yet, but not as strangers either. And through it all, the land itself endured. The rivers did not change course. The forests still grew thick with oak, and the same winds that once carried Saxon ships across the channel now rustled through new Norman banners. The castles rise from earth. At first, no one knew what they were building. The carts began to arrive with heavy timbers and stone blocks wrapped in wool. Men unfamiliar with the village paths began measuring the land, not the fields or fences, but the high ground, the corners, the dry patches above the river bend. Then the digging began. Not for crops, not for wells, but wide, deliberate trenches. Deep circles carved out with care. The villagers watched from a distance. A few were hired to help. Most were ordered. They had no word for it yet, but they would soon learn. A castle was coming. It rose slowly from mud to wood, from wood to stone. At first it looked like nothing, just a timber tower on a mound, circled by a ditch. Then it grew. A fence of sharpened stakes, a walkway, a gatehouse, a ring of raised earth, packed hard by hundreds of boots. It didn't look like something meant to house people. It looked like something meant to hold them back. Some villagers whispered that it was to guard against raiders. Others knew better. It wasn't built to protect the people nearby. It was built to watch them, to remind them that they were no longer the only power on the land. Inside the timber palisade, men in armor came and went. Some wore the duke's colors. Others bore the crests of lesser lords. There was always a garrison, never large, but enough. They drilled in the courtyard. They kept fires burning through the night. They rarely spoke to the villagers unless they had to. And yet, their presence changed everything. From the highest field you could see it now, this rising keep of foreign hands, like a tooth forced up from the ground. It wasn't part of the village, but it was tied to it now, permanently. And more were coming. Over the next years you began to hear of them elsewhere. One near the coast, built to watch the port. another in the forest, to oversee hunting rights and toll roads, one massive round grey, said to have towers so high, the crows nested below them. The castles multiplied, some stayed timber, others became stone, imported from quarries far away, carted at great cost. The labourers who built them were paid little, fed less, and remembered only when the walls began to lean or crack. The old paths to town changed. Now you walked around the ditch, under the gate. Sometimes you were searched. The markets shifted too. Tolls were added, permissions required. A shadow of rules now stretched across even simple things, buying wool, selling cheese, planting barley. From the village you could hear the iron ring of hammers inside the new castle's forge, you could smell the smoke. At night, torches flickered along its battlements like slow-moving stars. No one stormed these places. They didn't need to be taken by force. They were planted, then left to grow like trees with stone roots. And slowly they changed how people thought. Not just about who ruled, but what rule looked like. Power now had walls, gates, a drawbridge. It no longer sat beside you at the fire, or past you on the path to the river. It now looked down at you from above. But life went on. The fields were still sown. The animals still needed feeding. Babies were still born, old men still buried, and stories still told beside quiet hearths, and the castles. They stood, unmoving, unblinking. Not just symbols of the new order, but anchors, proof that something had changed, and would not be undone. Moats, walls, and wooden keeps. The first thing they dig is the ditch, wide, sloped, deep enough to make a man vanish below the earth with barely a sound. If the soil is good, it happens quickly. If the land is too stony, it takes longer. But they do it anyway. They always do. Because every castle begins with the same idea. Separation. This is the edge, they say. You live out there, we rule in here. Once the ditch is dug, they flood it, if they can. Redirect a stream, cut a trench to a nearby river. Sometimes it fills easily, becoming a true moat, green with algae and clouded with silt. Other times, it stays dry, a simple trench, but still enough to keep a horse from charging straight in. Then come the walls. At first they're made of wood, tall trunks, sharpened and planted side by side, lashed together with thick cord, and anchored by earth. They call it a palisade. It surrounds the entire central space. The bailey, they call it, a yard, of sorts, where supplies are kept, animals penned, tools stored. Inside that ring of wood, they build the keep. If the lord is in a hurry, or the land is unstable, it's made of timber too. A tall box-like tower with narrow slits for windows, a steep ladder or staircase to the upper floor, and a roof sharp enough to shed snow. It is not beautiful, but it works. From the top, you can see everything. Fields, villages, roads, the twisting paths through the woods, and just as importantly, everyone can see you. That's the point. The keep isn't just protection, it's a signal, a message written in oak and pine and packed earth. This is who holds power here. The villagers come to know its shape well. They walk past it when they go to market. They see its outline behind the trees when they gather wood. They know the pattern of torchlight in its windows at night. They know the color of the smoke that rises from its chimney. Sometimes they're called up to it, to pay taxes, to bring messages, to answer questions. Few go inside unless they must. Fewer still stay long. The ground around the walls changes too. What was once a meadow becomes a path of mud. A narrow road begins to form, rutted and pressed hard by cart wheels. Blacksmiths set up nearby. Bakers, traders with wagons from far away. A kind of small town grows outside the walls, uninvited, but tolerated. Because the castle draws people, and people bring coin. Still, life in the shadow of a wooden keep is not peaceful. The guards patrol constantly. They're not there to protect the people. They're there to protect the keep from the people. Orders are shouted in French. Doors are barred from the inside. And the lord, when he's there, rarely walks without armed company. Yet, over time, something changes. The villagers begin to understand the rhythm of the place. When the gates open, when the watch changes, which guard will share bread and which won't look you in the eye. The castle becomes familiar, not friendly, but familiar, until the day they tear it down. Because wood doesn't last forever. It rots, it burns, and once the land is claimed securely, the timber walls are replaced, stone for wood, lime mortar for lashings, real towers, real gates, iron portcullises, but that's later. For now in this chapter of time, it is a wooden keep that watches over the valley, damp, creaking, cold in winter, but still strong, and to the people below, it is both fear and safety, a threat and a promise. The moat still holds water, the walls still cast shadows, and the tower still stands. Not because it must, but because someone somewhere wants to be seen. Inside the bailey, blacksmiths and bows. Inside the wooden walls, past the gate and beneath the looming keep, lies the bailey. It isn't grand, it's crowded, muddy, always busy. This is not the part of the castle shown in tapestries. There are no velvet banners here, just the solid, breath-steamed chaos of work, hammering, shouting, dragging, stacking, grinding. Even in the cold, it's warm here, thanks to the forge and the endless churn of hands and feet. The bailey is where the real work of the castle happens. The blacksmith's corner is the loudest. You hear him before you see him. The steady, rhythmic strike of hammer on metal. It's not random, it's patterned, purposeful, almost like music. Inside a rough timber lean-to, the smith stands over the anvil, sleeves rolled, apron scorched black with years of sparks. He works in iron, iron for hinges, iron for plowshares, iron for horseshoes, and when the Lord commands it, iron for war. Stacks of half-formed swords lie beside curled tongs and raw iron rods. You can smell the charcoal, thick in your throat. It clings to everything, the straw, the walls, your hair. The forge glows white at the center, the hottest place in the castle. Even in winter you'd sweat just standing near it. He doesn't speak much, most blacksmiths don't, but he watches everything, people, carts, even the guards, because when something breaks, it comes to him. When something must be fixed before morning, it's his fire that must burn long into the night. Not far from the forge is the Fletcher's table. It's smaller, quieter, but no less important. This is where bows are strung and arrows shaped, slowly, precisely. Each shaft is chosen from straight young ash or birch, cut, whittled, feathered. The heads are small and sharp, affixed with hot glue made from hooves and resin. The Fletcher checks each one by spinning it between his palms. If it wobbles, it's firewood. If it flies true, it joins the growing bundle beneath his bench. He doesn't make long bows often. Those take years, seasoned yew in the hands of someone who understands not just how to carve, but how to wait. Most bows here are simpler, meant for short range, for hunting, for emergencies. There are other stations in the bailey too. A cartwright mending wheels with slow, careful strokes. A cooper hammering iron rings onto a barrel. A thatcher patching a roof with reed bundles tied with twisted cord. And everywhere, boys, messengers, apprentices, water fetchers, running errands between soldiers and smiths, between kitchens and storerooms. One boy carries a crate of arrows to the barracks, another hauls a bucket of clean sand to the forge, all of them learning, listening, watching. The bailey is not glamorous, but it is alive. It breathes through labor, it survives through rhythm, and in its own way it rules. Because without iron, there are no hinges, without arrows, no hunting, without the work done in this square patch of churned mud, the great stone tower above would be nothing but weight. Even the Lord must wait when the blacksmith is behind. Even the steward bows slightly to the man who can repair the gate latch. At night, the bailey falls quieter. The forge dims, the bows are racked, the carts stilled, but the smell remains, of smoke, of earth, of honest, necessary work. And in the morning, it all begins again, one hammer strike at a time. A castle's daily heartbeat. Before the sun rises, the castle is already moving, not loudly, not yet, but there's always someone awake before the light. In the kitchens near the back of the bailey, the fire is never truly out. A scullion boy stirs the ashes, coaxing life back into the embers. The cook follows soon after, hair tied, sleeves up, already muttering to herself about how little salt remains and who failed to soak the beans. The smell of smoke and bread begins to rise. Elsewhere, stable hands feed the horses before their own bellies are filled. Leather saddles are checked, hooves scraped, hay scattered. The castle's carts won't move without them, and neither will its messengers. By the time the sky turns pale, the bells sound. Not church bells, not yet, just the bell by the gate. It marks the shift. It says the guards must change posts. The drawbridge must be checked. The gate raised. The day has officially begun. Servants sweep the floors of the great hall with bundled reeds. A scribe lights a candle in the chapel, carefully scratching the date into the margins of a prayer book. The steward climbs the tower steps slowly, ledger under arm, to see what repairs remain unfinished. And still, no one speaks loudly. Castles, even when full, begin their days quietly. They stretch like old animals. Their heartbeats are slow at first. In the Lord's chamber, shutters creak open to the sound of crows. Linen curtains are pulled back. A basin of cold water is placed on the table. No one wakes the Lord directly, not unless summoned. The inner courtyard begins to echo with low voices. Visitors arrive, a reeve from the village, a friar with a letter, a merchant asking for audience. Most are told to wait. In the armory, blades are checked, not sharpened daily, but maintained always. A few guards drill in pairs beneath the tower, their wooden practice swords clacking in quick, familiar rhythms. The castle doesn't bustle, it hums. Each person knows where to go. A rhythm learned not from clocks, but from repetition. From watching who moves first, who speaks when, who must not be spoken to at all. By mid-morning, the castle is fully awake. The great hall is opened. Light pours in through narrow high windows. Meals are not served grandly, not on most days. Porridge, ale, bread. A little dried meat, if there's reason for it. No music, no guests of honor, just mouths to feed and work to resume. The steward calls names, hands out duties, argues with the kitchen staff, nods to the smith as he passes, who does not stop hammering. In the chapel, a monk chants softly, though few stop to listen. But the sound lingers, floating through the halls like a reminder that time passes even without us noticing. In the afternoon, the sun hangs heavy against the stone walls. Heat builds in the south tower. The kitchen grows loud again, dough rising, pots bubbling, pages run errands. A washerwoman lays damp linen across a hedge to dry. The Lord appears briefly, if he's present at all. He may speak with the steward, approve a letter, inspect the armory, or not. Some days he hunts. Some days he sleeps late, but the castle moves either way. By dusk the pace slows, tools are stowed, horses brushed down. A final meal is taken, torches are lit in their sconces, the kitchen fire is banked but not extinguished. The bell rings once more at the gate, the drawbridge creaks closed, guards post again. In the great hall, a few voices linger near the hearth, a guard sharpens his knife. A servant mends a torn boot. One of the pages, half asleep, leans against a pillar, dreaming of horses or knights or home. And then finally, the castle rests. Not asleep, not entirely, but still, its daily heartbeat slows, until morning comes again. Banquets and jesters by firelight. The great hall looks different at night, not just because of the torches, not just because the rushes have been swept and the floors washed. It's the mood, the air, the way people stand straighter, laugh louder, sit closer together, because tonight is a banquet night. It doesn't happen often. Sometimes the feast marks a holy day, sometimes it honors a guest, or a victory, or simply the turning of a season. The reason doesn't matter much to those below the salt. They'll take what they're given, and tonight, they're given meat. The cooks have been working since before dawn, boiling, roasting, slicing. Trenchers of stale bread are hollowed out to hold stews. Chickens are spiced and skewered. A boar's head, scorched and shining, is carried in with pride. The smell alone draws wide eyes and growling bellies. Torches hiss in their sconces along the walls. The hearth fire is piled high. Candles flicker in iron chandeliers, dripping wax onto the floor. Long tables are set, unevenly, with no matching plates, but set all the same. The Lord sits at the high table. His goblet is silver, his robe thick. He barely glances at the fare, speaking instead to the knights seated beside him. They laugh in Norman French, too fast for most to follow. But below them, in the long benches stretching out beneath the dais, the people eat, quietly at first. Then with more ease, is passed down the line, so is gossip, and for once, no one's watching too closely. In the middle of the meal, the jester appears. No one quite knows where he sleeps. He simply emerges, dressed in mismatched colors, bells tied to his sleeves, hair unkempt. His grin is not always joyful, but it is always wide. He juggles at first, apples, bones, a candle, until it drops. Then comes the song. A half-silly, half-sad thing in a tongue, half the room knows. Then a rhyme about the steward's bald head. Then an imitation of the Lord himself. The room stills, but the Lord laughs, and the room breathes again. The jester bows too low, winks too wide, and sits cross-legged on the hearthstones, plucking at a broken lute. His music is soft now, easy to ignore, but hard to forget. This is his role, to speak truths no one else dares, to entertain, yes, but also to remind. Because a jester is more than a fool, he is a mirror with a crooked frame. As the feast continues, the room grows warmer. Guards remove their helmets, servants sneak bites between courses. Even the steward, ever watchful, takes an extra slice of cheese. Outside, the night is cold, the trees are bare, the wind moves quietly through the stone towers. But in here by firelight, there is laughter, meat, wine, warmth. For a little while, the world feels distant, as if the war never happened, as if the land always belonged to these people, as if they are not simply guests in someone else's story. And maybe, just for a few hours, they aren't. The jester sings one last song, soft, wordless, and the hall falls quiet. The candles burn lower, the plates are cleared, the people drift to their beds, full, tired and strangely at peace, and the fire continues to crackle in the hearth, as the jester hums quietly to himself, rocking on his heels, watching the shadows stretch across stone. The castle as fortress and home. It's easy to forget that castles were meant for war, not when you're standing beside the hearth, not when a sleepy page nods off in a wooden chair, or a child runs laughing through the corridor, trailing a half-eaten plum. But look closer, and you remember. The walls are thick, thicker than a man is tall. The windows, narrow slits. The staircases turn clockwise, forcing a right-handed attacker to struggle on the ascent. Everything is designed with defense in mind. This place was built to endure, to be sieged, to outlast hunger, arrows, even fire. And yet, people live here, they sleep here, they cook, bathe, mend clothes, grumble about chores. The castle might have towers and battlements and iron gates, but it also has cradles, kitchens and quiet corners where nothing ever happens. It is both shield and shelter. On stormy nights, the wind howls past the arrow loops in the outer wall. It seeps in through cracks in the stone. The castle creaks like a ship at sea, but the fire stays lit. The stew still simmers. Someone snores softly in the next room. The garrison drills in the morning, but by afternoon, the courtyard hosts laundry lines and arguing chickens. The same ground where knights once practiced now hears lullabies and spilt buckets of water. The lord's chambers, high in the keep, are simple by modern eyes. No gold, no velvet, just heavy wooden furniture, a chest with a locked iron clasp, a tapestry hung to keep the warmth in. He sleeps in a curtained bed, but not alone in the building. Beneath him, servants sleep in the hall. Below them, guards doze with one eye open in the armory. Every floor has its own heartbeat. Even the coldest part of the castle, the dungeon, carries signs of life. The jailer's table, a pile of straw changed more often than you'd think. A single wax candle, burning just low enough to cast long shadows but not quite darkness. This is a home after all, not a comfortable one, not a gentle one, but a place where people live and die, where they celebrate feast days and mourn in the chapel, where a dog might curl beside the fire while a steward grumbles over tallies, where boots are left by doors and herbs hang drying above windows. The villagers who see the castle from afar think of it as power, a symbol of rule, of control, and they're not wrong. But those who live inside it learn a different truth, that it's also a shelter when the roads flood, a refuge when the forests feel unsafe, a place to grow up, to grow old, to serve something larger than yourself. The guards who polish armor also watch sunsets from the western tower. The maids who clean the rushes also hum songs their mothers once sang. Even the lord, armored and distant, has days where he simply wants silence and a bit of bread left warm. A castle is a fortress, yes, but it is also something messier, quieter, more human. It is a place where hard stone carries soft memories, and when the fires are low, and the noise has faded, and the wind presses gently against the shutters, it feels for a moment not like a symbol of rule, but like a place someone might call home. Lords, ladies, and layers of power. From a distance, power in the castle seems simple. There's the lord, he rules, everyone else serves. But come a little closer, walk those halls, stand near the hearth, wait long enough by the steward's table, and you'll see the truth. Power in a medieval castle is rarely simple. The lord may rule the land, sign charters, ride at the front of the hunt, but power comes in layers, soft, folded layers, some seen, many not. Yes, the lord is at the top, But not all lords rule the same. One might be stern and visible, issuing commands daily, inspecting work, holding court with a sharp tongue. Another might vanish into his chambers for days, relying on others to carry out his will. In both cases, things still get done, because beneath the lord, other hands hold the levers. The steward, for instance, he doesn't wear silk or carry a sword, but he knows every ration, every tool, every servant by name and habit. He manages the estate, like a conductor, guides music, raising his hand here, lowering it there. No grain moves without his tally, no coin changes hands without his word. Then there are the knights. Some are noble born, others raised through favor or battle. They don't rule the castle, but they carry weight, the kind of weight that comes with loyalty, blood spilled, and favors owed. A whispered complaint from a knight can travel faster than a letter sealed in wax. And then, the lady of the castle. If the lord is away, she becomes the center of everything. And even when he's home, she is still the one who runs the household, managing servants, overseeing the kitchens, tending to visitors, and keeping the social fabric of the place from fraying. She sees what others miss. The girl who's limping near the laundry, the guard who's drinking too early, the steward's sudden frown during accounts. She may speak softly, but when she speaks, people listen, because she remembers everything, and forgets nothing. Her chambers smell of lavender, ink, and warmth. Behind her, a loom. Beside her, a small wooden coffer, filled with letters, dried petals, bits of cloth, things that hold stories, debts, warnings. Sometimes, power is a look held a second too long. Sometimes, it's who gets the extra bolt of wool in winter. And outside the noble circle, more layers still. The chaplain, who hears every confession and writes every letter. The blacksmith, who could delay repairs out of quiet spite. The cook, who knows which guard sneaks food and who brings her news. The old washerwoman, who listens more than she speaks. Even the jesters and fools hold a strange kind of power, allowed to say what others cannot, to mock those who go unchecked. And sometimes, that laughter cuts deeper than a blade. Power in the castle isn't just about title, it's about access, memory, reputation, and everyone's watching. Who speaks with the lord in private, who dines beside whom, who is missing, and why. A glance, a pause, a quiet word in the chapel. These things matter more than they seem. The castle may be stone, but the society inside it is woven like cloth. Tug one thread, and others shift. From the lowest kitchen boy to the highest lady, everyone knows their place, and quietly wonders what would happen if they moved. The quiet watch from the towers. Climb the stone steps, spiraling, narrow, worn by hundreds of boots, and eventually you'll reach the top, the tower. It stands above the whole castle, above the bailey, above the gatehouse, above the sleeping quarters, and kitchens and fires. From up here, you can see the full shape of things. The walls curving around like arms, the roads running out like ribbons, the village rooftops huddled in their crooked rows, the fields beyond, stitched in browns and greens. And farther still, if the air is clear, you might catch the shimmer of a river, or the faint smoke of another hearth. But no one climbs the tower for the view. They climb to keep watch. Day and night, the castle posts its sentinels. Always two, sometimes three. One looks outward, the other downward. They shift positions without a word. It is a quiet kind of work. There are no shouts, no charges, no alarms. Not most days. Most days, it's just wind and time. The soft flap of a banner, the creak of the weather vane, the muffled cough of a bird nesting in the eaves. The guard leans on the parapet, not out of laziness, just habit. He listens, watches, thinks. He's been up here in every kind of weather, in heat that makes the stone hot to the touch, and in snow that clings to his beard, in fog so thick the ground disappears, and on moonlit nights where he swears he can see his childhood home miles away. Up here, sounds travel strangely. Sometimes he hears laughter from the bailey, other times it's the blacksmith's hammer, echoing like it's just behind him. Occasionally he hears nothing at all, just his own breath and the wind teasing the edges of his cloak. The guard keeps a horn at his belt, but he rarely touches it. If there were trouble, he'd use it. 1 long note for strangers, 2 for smoke, 3 for open attack. He's never used 3, still he watches, because the tower isn't just for warning, it's a promise. To those inside the walls, that someone is awake, someone is looking outward, that while they sleep, while they eat, while they pray or argue or dream, someone is quietly making sure the world stays far away. And to those outside the walls, it's a message too. that this place is protected, that the banner still flies, that no one enters unnoticed. But the watch isn't all duty. Sometimes on long shifts, the guards speak, softly, so their voices don't carry. They talk of food, of family, of things they miss, of dreams they've had, and what they'd do if they ever left the castle walls. Some keep a small token hidden in the tower, a charm, a carving, a scrap of parchment folded in a crack between stones, something just for them, something quiet. And when the shift ends, they descend slowly, their legs sore, their faces cold, their minds a little more distant than before, because hours spent in the tower do something to you. They stretch your thoughts out past the trees, they make time move differently, but always, always, someone else is climbing to take your place, because the watch never truly ends. The castle breathes, and someone listens, the land lies still, and someone watches, and up in the tower, high above the flicker of hearth fires and the laughter of halls, a single figure stands, quiet, calm, and waiting. When the drawbridge lifts, it doesn't happen quickly. First, there's the creak, deep and wooden, older than the men who hear it. Then the groan of chains, strained and reluctant. The drawbridge begins to rise, plank by plank, wet with river mist, the iron bolts along its edge, catching the last bit of light. The gate is closing. Some pause to watch. A boy stops on his way to the stables. A washerwoman lowers her bundle of linens. Even a guard, out of habit more than curiosity, turns to glance over his shoulder as the familiar shape of the bridge begins to tilt. It's not a dramatic thing. No horns sound, no orders are shouted. Just the slow, deliberate folding of the outside world. Once the drawbridge lifts, you are either in, or you are out. Those within the walls return to what they were doing. The hall must still be swept. The kitchens must still serve supper, but the tone shifts. The village is now out of reach. Travelers will sleep outside. Letters will wait until morning. The world is smaller now. The portcullis comes next. It lowers with a clatter of iron teeth, locking into place like a giant comb. Once it's down, the gatehouse is sealed. 2 guards remain inside, oil lamps lit, cards half played, one eye always toward the road that no longer matters until dawn. Up in the towers, the watch changes. Down in the bailey, torches are lit. The castle takes a breath, a long one, a tired one, because when the drawbridge lifts, the day is over. The danger, whatever it was, is behind you, or at least outside. The fields beyond the moat go dark. The sky shifts from blue to black, and the stone begins to hold its warmth rather than letting it go. Inside, a page yawns and curls beneath a woolen blanket. A dog scratches once at the rushes, then settles. The steward reviews one last list by candlelight, and somewhere deep inside the keep, a final door is bolted shut. You don't always notice when the drawbridge lowers in the morning. It just happens, with the rising of the sun, with the start of chores, with the noise of carts returning and feet in the mud. But you always notice when it lifts, not just because of the sound, but because of the feeling that for now, this place is whole, that what lies within is protected, that the outside can wait. And so the chains still, and the groan fades, and the wind carries no footsteps from the bridge anymore, just the hush of water below, the sigh of wind through arrow slits, and the breath of a castle asleep behind its gate. Stone cathedrals that touch the sky. You don't see the cathedral at first, you feel it. Before the spires come into view, before the bells, before the carving and the glass, you feel the silence it casts over the town, like a breath held just a little longer than usual. The road turns, and suddenly, it's there, towering above the rooftops, higher than any tree, higher than any building you've ever seen. The cathedral isn't finished, of course, they rarely are. There's scaffolding along one side. Stone dust settles in the cracks of every window. A crane made of wood creaks as it turns, lifting a block no larger than a child, but heavy enough to crush a grown man. The masons say this one might take another 50 years, maybe more, but it already feels eternal. The first time you step inside, your eyes go up. Everyone's do. The ceiling vanishes into darkness, too far to touch, too high to understand. The arches stretch like ribs of some vast stone animal. Light filters through stained glass windows, dust catching in the beams. It's not warm. The stone holds a permanent chill, but it doesn't feel empty. It feels awake, and yet it isn't magic. It's work. Real hands placed every stone. Real backs bent under every beam. Most of the people who laid the foundation are gone now, buried, moved on, forgotten, but the walls still rise. Every morning, the sound of tools begins before sunrise. Hammers, pulleys, chisels, Latin prayers murmured before the first lift. The bishop visits sometimes. He speaks of God's glory, of heaven made visible in mortar and lime. But the workers don't talk about heaven. They talk about pay, about how many stones must be hauled today, about how the apprentice dropped a carving and blamed the frost, and yet they keep building. Not because they believe they'll see the end of it, but because the work itself becomes something else, something larger. There's pride in shaping a column that will stand for centuries. There's meaning in setting your mark into a block that strangers will stare at 100 years from now. Walk further in, and you pass the chapels. Small side rooms filled with candlelight and whispered prayers. A woman kneels there every day, always in the same spot. She never speaks. She just rests her hand on the stone, as if the walls are listening. In another corner, a clerk copies texts by hand, script slanting slightly, ink running thin. He doesn't look up, not even when the bells ring. You hear those bells now. They aren't loud, not inside, just deep, measured. The kind of sound you feel in your chest more than your ears. They mark the hour. They remind the town that time is still passing, even if the cathedral never seems to change. You stay a while, not because there's something to do, but because the quiet feels different here. Not empty, but filled with purpose, as if the building is thinking, remembering, waiting. And when you leave, you don't walk away quickly. You glance back once, maybe twice. The spires reach above the clouds, the gargoyles peer down like silent guardians. The cranes are still turning, the stone is still rising, and you know quietly, certainly, that this place will outlive you, and outlive your children. And maybe that's the point. Not everything in this world is built to be finished. Some things are built simply to be worthy. Monasteries of ink and silence. You don't find a monastery by accident. It's always just a little out of the way, down a narrow road, past rows of hedgerows and quiet fields, built not to be seen, but to be left alone. The first thing you notice is the stillness. Even the birds seem quieter here. The stone walls are low and plain, without banners or guards. A wooden gate stands open, not exactly inviting but not forbidding either. You step inside and the world changes. The air smells of old wood, warm bread, and something faintly herbal, lavender perhaps, or sage drying in the kitchens. The cloister walk runs in a square, around a garden of trimmed grass and crooked vegetables. The hallways are dim, the windows narrow, the ceilings low. Every sound feels louder here. Your boots on the floor, your breath, the soft clink of metal from the refectory, but no one hurries. No one raises their voice, and nothing feels wasted. A monk passes you, robe brushing stone, eyes lowered. He nods, once gently, and continues. He does not speak, most of them don't, not unless it's necessary. Silence isn't just a rule here, it's a way of being. The monastery is run by rhythm, not by bells alone, but by the rise and fall of daily life. Morning prayers, meals, work, scripture, rest, then again, and again. For weeks, for years, inside the scriptorium, the world narrows even further. Here, men sit hunched over desks, their fingers stained black with ink. Quills scratch slowly across parchment, forming letters so careful they seem carved instead of written. No noise, except the gentle rasp of reed on skin, the soft creak of wood, the occasional sigh. They don't write their own words. They copy. Bibles, commentaries, ancient texts saved from ruin. Each page is a labor of hours. Each letter must be correct. One error, and the whole sheet may need to be scraped and started again. Some monks illuminate the margins, painting golden vines and curling beasts into the empty space. Others rule lines with thread and bone. One sharp-eyed brother inspects every page with a frown so slight it barely moves his face. But none of them rush, because here, time is not a pressure, it's a gift. To write one book might take a year, to finish a full Bible, a lifetime. In the herbarium, another brother slices dried leaves into jars. He doesn't speak either, but gestures kindly, if you seem curious. A paste made from honey and thyme for sore throats. A wine infused with elderberry for fevers. In the corner, a small pot simmers without boiling, the steam carrying the scent of crushed mint. The monks live simply. Bread, cheese, herbs, and sometimes fish. They sleep in rows, on straw. They wake before the sun. They do not own. They do not seek. They keep the words, the prayers, the knowledge that might otherwise be lost. The monastery is quiet, but it is not empty. There's something alive here, softly alive. A sense that meaning is built slowly, carefully, one line at a time, that a life lived in silence still speaks, even if only on parchment. When you leave, the fields seem louder, the wind feels less gentle, the road less smooth, but you carry something with you, a hush that lingers, a memory of ink drying in the light of a narrow window, a line of scripture half finished, a page that will outlast the man who wrote it, and behind you, in the low stone halls, the work continues. No applause, no reward, just another breath, another word, another quiet act of remembrance. The chant before dawn. It's still night. The stars haven't faded, and the wind carries the sharp bite of dew. The trees are motionless. The town is asleep, but behind thick monastery walls, candles flicker to life one by one. The monks are waking. No bells, no shouting, just movement, quiet and practiced. Sandaled feet touch cold stone. Robes are pulled over shoulders. Your hands find the cord at the waist and tie it without thought. No one speaks. They do not need to. The hour is matins. It comes before sunrise, before birds, before the first crack of light. It is the hour of watching, of waiting, of remembering that not all things in life are loud or fast or seen. Some things live only in the stillness before morning. They gather in the chapel. No pews, no stained glass, just stone walls and long wooden benches. Candles line the walls, small flames trembling in the draught. In the choir stalls, the monks take their places. They bow, they breathe, then one begins. The chant does not start with music, it begins with breath, and out of that breath, words emerge, slow and even, as old as the stone itself. Another voice joins, then another. Soon, a soft tide of sound fills the chapel. Latin, though few understand it. Notes that rise and fall like smoke. No harmony, no instruments. Just voices following a path written centuries ago. They aren't performing. They aren't trying to impress. They chant because they must. Because the world turns. Because time flows. Because someone, somewhere, must remember. The sound is not loud. You could walk past the chapel without noticing. But inside, it feels full, as if the walls have opened slightly, letting in something deeper than sound. Some monks close their eyes as they sing, others stare at the single flickering flame in the apse. The youngest reads from a large book resting on a slanted wooden stand. His voice shakes at first, then steadies. No one corrects him, no one hurries him. Outside, the sky is beginning to shift, not light yet, but less dark. The stars blink away, one by one. Inside, the chant continues. They will not speak again until after Lauds, the morning prayer. Even then, it will be only what's needed, words used carefully, like herbs in a pot. The rest of the day will be filled with labor, study, rest. But this hour, the hour before light, belongs to the chant. Eventually, the voices fall silent. No final note, no applause, just stillness. The candles crackle, a few heads bow, and then quietly, they rise. The sun is not up yet, but it's coming, and the monks return to their chambers, or the kitchen, or the library. A page will be copied today, a garden weeded, a gate repaired, but all of it will rest on what began in darkness. A simple chant, offered not for recognition, but as part of the rhythm of life. Outside, a bird finally sings, the first voice of the world beyond, and behind the chapel's walls, the last echo of prayer fades into stone. Vows of poverty and the Benedictines. The Benedictines don't live for themselves. That's one of the first things they'll tell you, if they speak to you at all. They live for God, for order, for each other, and to do that they take vows, firm ones, not symbolic, not metaphorical, vows that shape every moment of their lives. Of those, the vow of poverty is the most visible. You see it in their robes, always brown or black, coarse, heavy, made to last. Not decorative, not comfortable, no ornament, no excess. Just wool, mended where it's torn, patched where it's worn thin. They do not own the robe. The monastery does. If they leave, it stays. Their cells are no more than small stone rooms with a straw-filled mattress and a wooden stool. Sometimes a crucifix on the wall, sometimes not even that. No personal trinkets, no collections, no keepsakes. One blanket, folded tightly, one candle, half burned. What they use they share, what they do not need, they do not have. A Benedictine monk doesn't ask for more food than is given, doesn't keep extra bread hidden beneath the bed, doesn't tuck away wine for feast days. To do so would break, not just the rule, but the balance, because this life is about balance, and poverty to them is not misery, it's freedom. Freedom from ownership, freedom from envy, freedom from wanting more than the rule of Saint Benedict says is enough. The rule governs everything, written long ago, copied again and again. It tells them when to pray, when to sleep, when to work. It tells them to greet each guest as if he were Christ himself. It tells them to own nothing. It tells them to serve. That includes manual labor. You might think monks spend all day in books, but the Benedictines divide their time. Some hours are for prayer, others are for work. In the garden, barefoot in the dirt, they pull weeds with the same attention they give to scripture. They clean the floors, mend the roofs, carry water from the well, one bucket at a time, not as punishment, not as chore, but as duty. They believe physical labor humbles the spirit, and poverty reminds them that all they have, food, shelter, community, comes from God and not from their own status or wealth. And yet the monastery itself may not look poor. Some are large, beautiful, even, with strong stone walls, warm halls, stocked kitchens, and a scriptorium filled with expensive ink and vellum, but none of it belongs to any one monk. The riches serve the community, the guests, the sick who seek care. Nothing is hoarded, nothing is hidden. When the monastery receives gifts, land, coin, goods, it's managed by the abbot and steward. Even then, it is used carefully, distributed for the benefit of others. The vow of poverty still holds. No monk eats better than the next. No monk sleeps warmer than the other. Even the abbot wears the same robe. You notice something else too, if you stay long enough. They don't complain. Not about the cold, or the food, or the early hour of prayers. It's not because they don't feel discomfort. It's because they believe that discomfort, when offered humbly, leads to growth. When shared by all, it becomes a kind of unity. Poverty, in this place, doesn't mean emptiness. It means trust. Trust in the rule. Trust in the rhythm of prayer and work. Trust that owning less allows space for more peace, more clarity, more discipline. And when a new novice arrives, unsure and unshaved, the monks do not give him riches. They give him the robe, the rule, the work, and a place in the rhythm. Because here to have nothing is not shameful. It's the beginning of something greater. The abbot with a sword. The sword wasn't always there. Not when he first arrived. Not when he was young and quiet and new to the life of the monastery. Back then he'd handed it over willingly, wrapped in cloth, set at the feet of the prior, and never asked for it again. But years passed. Seasons changed, and the world beyond the monastery did not stay peaceful. When he became abbot, they brought the sword back to him. It had been stored carefully, almost ceremonially, oiled now and then by the steward, kept from rust. No one said he had to wear it. But they all noticed when he did. He didn't wear it in the chapel. He didn't wear it to prayers. But when he stepped outside the walls, into the forest paths, the market town, or to settle a dispute over land, he wore it, not for show, not to threaten, just as a quiet reminder. Because being abbot wasn't only about chants and candles, it was about protection. Not just of the monks, but of the poor who came knocking, of the families who lived on monastery land, of the traveling scribes and the sick, and the pilgrims who arrived barefoot and bleeding. The world outside didn't always care about vows. Bandits didn't care that you wore a cross. Soldiers didn't care that you held a book. When raiders crossed the border, it wasn't the bishop who stood in their way. It was whoever had the will and the blade to do so. And sometimes it was the abbot. Not because he wanted to fight, but because he knew how. Before the robe, there had been armor. Before the psalms, the sound of hooves and horns and steel. He rarely spoke of that life, but the way he stood, the way he watched the horizon, gave it away. Still, he never glorified it. He taught the younger monks how to read, how to grow herbs, how to pray with focus and calm. He smiled easily, but rarely laughed. He moved quietly, but you always knew when he entered a room. And when there was trouble, real trouble, he didn't raise his voice. He simply placed the sword at his side and walked toward it. Not every abbot carried a sword. Some believed it broke the vow. Some said a man could not serve two masters, Christ and violence. But here, in this place, The sword had become a tool of peace, unused, but ready. Not swung in anger, but held in memory. It wasn't about domination, it was about presence, about the weight of responsibility. The sword reminded others that while the monastery might be a place of prayer, it was not helpless, that the boundary between the sacred and the dangerous wasn't always as clear as people liked to think. Sometimes, faith had to be defended. Not with blood, not with fire, but with the quiet willingness to stand, to protect what needed protecting, to be both shepherd and shield. At night, the abbot hung the sword by his bed. He would sit quietly beside it, reading by candlelight, lips moving with the rhythm of a psalm, not afraid, not ashamed, just prepared. And when he closed the book and lay down, the room settled into silence again, a silence not of retreat, but of watchfulness. Because even here, even in this place of vows and peace and stillness, the world could come knocking, and someone would need to answer. Manuscripts, lamps, and time. The scriptorium smells like ink, wax, and old dust. It's quiet, not because silence is required, but because the work itself demands it. Words are too easy to ruin with distraction. Inside these walls, sound is rare. The scrape of a quill across parchment, the creak of a stool shifting, the soft clink of a sand jar being uncorked. The monk at the third desk from the window has been there since before sunrise. His name is Brother Alric. He doesn't look up when you step into the room. His head is bent over the page, shoulders stiff, one hand holding a straight edge of wood to guide the lines. The other hand moves slowly, steady and deliberate, drawing each letter with the kind of care most people never give to anything. He's not writing his own words, he's copying a book written decades ago, maybe centuries. A psalter, worn and faded, sitting just to his left. The letters in that one are beginning to vanish, but the shapes are still there, just enough to follow. He copies everything, not just the text, but the abbreviations, the flourishes, the little imperfections. He knows the page he's working on now will take him at least 2 more days, maybe 3, if the weather changes and the damp makes the ink run. His tools are few: a knife for sharpening his quills, a small pot of black ink, another of red, a string of fine thread to hold down the curling corners of parchment, and a candle stub that he lights only when the sun fades behind the window. To outsiders it might look like punishment, this endless copying, but to Brother Alric, the page is a kind of prayer. He doesn't rush. That's the first lesson they all learn. Rushing leads to smudging. It leads to mistakes. And in this room, mistakes mean scraping the parchment down with a blade and starting again. Every sheet of vellum is expensive. It might have taken months to prepare. He treats each one like a treasure. The daylight shifts as the morning turns. Another monk enters briefly to light the lamps. The flame flickers along the brass holders, and the smell of warm oil drifts across the room. Brother Alric's eyes are beginning to sting. He blinks slowly, sets down the quill, and stretches his fingers. Then he leans back, not far, just enough to release the tension in his neck. His hand has started to ache again, the way it does in colder months. He ignores it, reaches for a sip of water, then continues. Sometimes he hums very softly while he works, not a tune, just a slow repetition of vowels, a way to keep his place, a way to keep time. He's not alone. Across the room, another scribe is illuminating a page from the Gospel of Luke. Gold leaf catches the candlelight as the painter adds another petal to a vine curling through the margins. Brother Alric never envied the illuminators. Their work is beautiful, yes, but also delicate, even fussy. He prefers the rhythm of lines, the slow, even pace of word after word, line after line, hour after hour. There's comfort in it. The rest of the world falls away. Outside, the bell for sext rings. Noon, another break, another prayer. But he finishes the sentence before he stops. He lays a thin sheet of linen across the wet ink to protect it. He places a small polished stone on top to weigh it down. Then he stands and blows out his candle, even though the lamp has been lit. Habit. As he leaves, the scriptorium feels unchanged. The same air, the same dust, the same half-written books resting under the same patient light. But the page on Brother Alric's desk holds something that didn't exist yesterday. 312 words, copied by hand, flawless, and tomorrow there will be more. Saints, relics, and pilgrimage roads. The road is old, worn by centuries of footsteps, some barefoot, some in sandals, a few limping. No wagons here, just people, some walking alone, some in quiet groups, all headed in the same direction. They're pilgrims. You know them by the scallop shells tied to their cloaks, by the smooth walking sticks, by the dust on their hems and the silence in their eyes. Some are here for penance, some for hope. Some are just trying to keep a promise made in the dark. After a long night of fear or illness or prayer, they've left behind their villages, their trades, their routines, and they walk. The destination varies. Maybe it's the shrine of St. Cuthbert in the north. Maybe the bones of St. James in far-off Compostela. Maybe a monastery nearby with a saint's finger kept in a silver reliquary, said to heal fevers and restore barren fields. But it's not just about where they're going, it's about what they're carrying. Stories. Every pilgrim carries a story. A child lost, a sickness survived, a sin confessed but not forgotten. And along the way those stories mix, shared over evening fires, whispered in chapel corners, sung in broken voices under the stars. The roads aren't easy. They pass through forests and over rivers, into strange towns where the dialect is hard to follow and the food tastes just slightly wrong. There are days when it rains for hours and nothing is dry. Nights when the inns are full and a stable must do. And always there are risks, thieves, wolves, fevers that creep in and settle deep. But still they walk. At certain bends in the road there are crosses carved into stones, waymarkers, places to stop and pray. Sometimes the pilgrims leave small offerings, a coin, a bit of ribbon, a carving of wood or bone, not valuable, just meaningful. And then there are the relics. Behind thick church walls, under candlelight and guarded by priests or monks, they rest. A saint's toe bone, a piece of cloth touched to the robe of a martyr, a fragment of the true cross maybe. Each relic is displayed in glass or gold, sealed tight, often locked. People kneel before them, not because the bone itself holds power, but because the story does, because faith needs anchors, because the invisible sometimes needs a visible place to rest. A mother touches her rosary to the relic and prays. A man who hasn't spoken in weeks finally weeps. A child leaves behind a small wooden toy, and then, slowly, the pilgrims begin the journey home. Changed, maybe, healed, sometimes, but always a little quieter, a little older, a little more certain that faith is not about answers, it's about the willingness to keep walking. Long after the saints are gone, their names remain, etched into chapel walls, woven into songs, carried on tired feet down winding roads, one quiet step at a time. Sermons of fire and eternal flame. The village church stands on a small rise, just above the fields. It's not large, just one nave, a low wooden roof, a bell tower that leans slightly to the left. Crows nest in its eaves. Ivy curls around the stones. There's always a draft near the doors, no matter how often they're patched. But on Sundays, the whole village comes. They walk in slowly. Men, women, children. Some in silence, some whispering. The young ones fidget, their mothers tapping them still. The old ones sit with hands folded, eyes half closed as if already in prayer. There's no music, not today. Just the low creak of benches, the cough of someone near the back, and the sound of the priest stepping up to the altar. He doesn't smile. He never really does. His robe is plain but clean. His beard is short, and his voice is deep and careful. The kind that seems to echo even when it shouldn't. He stands beneath the crude wooden cross and begins not with a blessing, but with fire, not literal fire, but words that burn. He speaks of sin, of wrath, of the judgment that waits beyond death's door. He tells of the eternal flame, of souls who wandered too far from the path, of choices made in secret that are always somehow seen. The villagers shift in their seats, not because they don't believe him, but because they do. Because they've heard the stories, because they've seen the paintings, red demons and black mouths and souls screaming in stone, because they remember that strange storm, that ruined crop, that sickness that didn't spread, but still took someone they loved. The priest's hands do not tremble, his eyes stay fixed on the altar, or the far wall, or nothing at all. He speaks slowly, like each word must land heavily, before he moves to the next. He says the flame is eternal, that repentance must be now, that the soul once lost cannot be bartered back. He does not smile, but neither does he shout. His voice is not angry, it's sad, as though he too carries a fear he cannot quite name. Then the candles are lit, 4 of them, each on a heavy iron stand, one by one. No grand gesture, no miracle, just fire, real, quiet, trembling in the draught. But the light changes the room. It softens the lines in the stone. It warms the carved faces of saints above the altar, and as the sermon turns slowly, carefully, it leaves behind wrath and begins to speak of mercy, of penance, of confession, of the chance, however slim, to begin again. A few heads bow, a few eyes close, one man wipes his hand across his mouth, as if to swallow something heavy. The sermon ends without applause, without music. The fire still burns. The villagers leave slowly, blinking against the sun outside. Some speak to each other, most do not. They return to the fields, the kitchens, the animals, but the priest's words cling like smoke, on their clothes, in their hair, in the quiet spaces between chores. And inside the church, the candles continue to burn. The priest kneels, alone in the front pew. He does not speak. He just watches the flames and breathes slowly. Because fire does not only mean punishment, it means warning, it means warmth, it means the chance to see your shadow before it consumes you. Faith, fear, and the confessional. The church is nearly empty now. The candles from morning have burned low, dripping wax onto the iron stands. The pews are quiet, the air still heavy with incense. Outside, the sun has faded behind the trees, and the last birds are settling in the rafters. But inside the chapel, someone waits. He's not kneeling, just sitting, half hidden in the shadows near the back, watching the small wooden box against the far wall. It's not grand. No carved angels, no velvet curtain, just a rough-built seat with a screen made from thin slats, darkened by use and age. The confessional. The priest sits inside already. You can tell by the shape of his shadow through the screen. His hands rest on his knees, his head slightly bowed. He doesn't call people in. He doesn't chase them down. He just waits. Eventually the man near the back stands. He walks slowly, each step a little heavier than it needs to be. His boots scuff the stone floor. He glances once at the altar, then turns and slips into the confessional. The door creaks, then closes. From outside there's no sound. Inside it's different. The space is close. The air smells of sweat and old wood. The priest says nothing. Not yet. He waits, the way they're taught to. "Bless me, Father," the man says finally, "for I have sinned." The voice is low, almost a whisper. You've heard those words before. Everyone has. They're said the same way every time, but they never mean quite the same thing twice. Sometimes it's stolen bread, sometimes a lie to a neighbor, sometimes it's anger, burned hot and swallowed too late, but other times the voice hesitates. It stumbles, or breaks, and in that pause is something larger than just guilt. Fear, because confession isn't only about honesty, it's about facing the thing you've tried not to name, the thing you hoped no one else saw, and saying it out loud, here, in the half-dark, to a man who might know your face, even if he pretends not to. The priest listens. He's trained to do that. He does not interrupt. He does not comfort. He lets the words come slowly, broken and awkward if they must. His face stays still, even when the stories are ugly. He's heard worse. He's heard things that no man should have to carry, but he does, because that's the vow. When the voice falls silent, the priest leans forward slightly. He speaks not in judgment, but in measure, a psalm, a penance, a path back however narrow. He does not promise peace. He does not grant it. He only points to where it might begin. Say 3 prayers, he says quietly, and speak truth when next the chance comes. The door opens. The man steps out. His face is unreadable. He doesn't look back, just pulls the door shut, steps into the aisle, and walks out into the night. The priest stays where he is. He won't leave until the candles burn out, until he's sure no one else is coming, until he's given every soul its chance, no matter how quiet the voice or how long the silence between sentences, because confession isn't about clearing a record, it's about facing what's been buried, and trusting despite everything, that something can still be forgiven. The nun, the cloister, and the needle. The convent is smaller than the monastery. Its stone walls are lower, its buildings closer together. No towers, no relic chapels, no grand library of gilded texts, but it has something else. A softness, a quiet that isn't heavy, but steady, like cloth folded neatly in a drawer. You enter through a wooden gate into the cloister garden, a square of green enclosed by covered walkways. Herbs grow in crooked lines, sage, rue and mint. There's a fig tree near the corner wall, heavy with leaves. The air smells faintly of lavender, and under the arcade, in the long shadow of the afternoon, sit the sisters, not talking, not idle, but working. You hear the click of needles before you see them, thin metal, bright in the light, flashing gently through linen. Sister Amelina sits furthest from the gate, always in the same spot, a bench worn smooth by her years of sitting there. Her face is round, soft at the edges, with a line between her brows that never quite fades. She holds her embroidery frame steady as her hands move, not fast, not slow, just steadily. She doesn't look down often. Her fingers know the path, red thread today, curving into the hem of an altar cloth, a vine with leaves too small to notice unless you look closely. She's sown hundreds of them, maybe more. She doesn't count. This is her labor and her prayer, because in this convent every task is devotion. Whether washing dishes, tending the sick, or sewing altar linens, no motion is wasted, no gesture too small to offer. The needle is her voice, the pattern, her silence. Around her, other nuns work too. One is darning socks for orphans, another is finishing a veil for a novice who will take her vows next week. Their tools are simple, their cloth rough but clean, but their work, when it's finished, will travel far, to churches, to nobles, to pilgrims who will never know who stitched the hem they kneel upon. Amelina used to speak more, years ago, before the arthritis in her hands, before the abbess passed, but now she mostly hums as she works, fragments of chants from morning prayers, sometimes a lullaby her mother sang when she was small, before she came here. She doesn't miss the outside world, the cloister is enough. The hours of the day are shaped by bells, lauds, terce, sext, nun, vespers. In between, there's always work, always the garden to weed, the infirmary to sweep, the thread to sort, and there's peace in that. Not the loud kind, not the kind that fills you, but the kind that stays with you, quiet and careful, like the stitch of thread in cloth, one after the other, binding something invisible to something real. She finishes a line of leaves and ties the thread in a small knot. Then she pauses, not to rest, but to breathe, to look up. The light in the cloister has changed, the shadows stretching longer now. Evening will come soon. Time for vespers, and then more sewing, or candle wicking, or prayers in the chapel with only the sound of wind through stone. But for now, just this moment, just the thread, just her hands, steady again. Because even in a small convent, behind thick walls, a life can be full of care, full of rhythm, full of quiet meaning. And somewhere far away someone will kneel at an altar and never know that the hem they touch was stitched by Sister Amelina beneath a fig tree with red thread and patient hands. The Pope calls the faithful to arms. It starts as a rumor. A rider passing through the market town speaks of it. Then a monk, returning from a journey, mentions the crowds he saw, crowds gathered in France, in open fields, pressed close around a man with a staff and a voice that carried like thunder. The Pope, Urban II, he stood beneath a cross and told the world that Jerusalem had fallen, that Christian blood had been spilled, that churches had been burned, that the Holy Land cried out, and that it was time to answer. He did not speak of politics, not of land, not of gold. He spoke of God, and what began as a sermon has become a summons. Back in the monastery, the news comes in slowly. A merchant's son leaves home with nothing but a crude wooden sword and a cross sewn into his cloak. A nobleman offers his lands to his cousin, claiming he will return when Jerusalem is free. A barefoot priest shouts in the village square that those who die on the road will not be damned, but glorified. No one is quite sure what to believe. In the cloister, the monks speak in low voices. Some are troubled, others are quiet in a different way, introspective, restless. Even the abbot has been staring out the window more often. The idea of a holy war reaches into places even the rule of Saint Benedict cannot fully shield. Outside, men gather in taverns and chapels, young ones especially. Some who had never held a blade now clutch rusted swords with sudden purpose. Some who had never traveled farther than the next town are preparing to cross mountains. They call it a pilgrimage, but everyone knows it is war. The Pope's words ring through the land, even in places he will never visit. Deus vult, they say. God wills it. They chant it in the streets. They carve it into their shields. They say it when they leave home, when they kiss their wives goodbye, when they tie a red cross to their shoulder with trembling hands. But here in the monastery, things remain for the moment unchanged. The bells still toll, the prayers still rise, the ink still dries on half-finished pages. But there's a tension now, subtle, like a thread pulled tight. Brother Elric sharpens his quills with less care than usual. The novices ask more questions during scripture readings. Even Sister Amelina, in the convent across the fields, has begun sewing crosses into tunics at the request of passing strangers. It's no longer a rumor. The Pope has spoken, and the world has tilted. A war has been given the name of God, and what was once distant, foreign cities, deserts, kingdoms beyond maps, is now folded into sermons and songs and prayers for safety. Not all will go, but all will feel it. Even those behind cloister walls, even those who have sworn to peace, because when the Pope calls the faithful to arms, silence itself must decide what it believes. And soon, very soon, the roads will be full of men who once prayed in quiet, now marching beneath banners, singing songs they barely understand, toward a place they've never seen. A cross on the chest, a sword in hand. The cloth is red. It's not new. It's been cut from an old banner, frayed slightly at the edge. His wife hands it to him without speaking. He presses it to his chest, just above the heart, and begins to sew. He's not a soldier. He's never been to war. But this is what everyone is doing now. The Pope spoke. The priests repeated it. The bishop confirmed it from the pulpit, just last Sunday. Jerusalem is in danger, they say. Christ's tomb defiled. Holy land taken by strangers. There is only one thing to do. Take up the cross. So he does. With shaking hands he threads the needle and pulls the red strip tight. The shape is rough, uneven. It puckers slightly in the middle. But it's there, a cross. Proof, his sword is older than he is. It belonged to his father, who had no use for it. After the last border skirmish ended, it's been hanging above the hearth for years, dull but clean. He sharpens it slowly, carefully, by candlelight, not because he knows how to fight, but because it feels wrong to carry a blade that can't cut. He tells himself, this is a pilgrimage, that God will protect the faithful, that the sins of those who march will be forgiven. That's what the priest said, that all who die on the road to Jerusalem will be washed clean. It's a strange comfort. Around the village, others are preparing too. Some gather in the square to practice drills, though few know how to hold a shield properly. The smith is overworked, reforging old spearheads and hammering dented helmets. Even the children know what's coming. They tie cords around their tunics and march in circles, shouting words they barely understand. Deus vult, they cry. God wills it. The man says goodbye to his son that night. He doesn't know how long he'll be gone. No one does. He leaves half the seed grain behind, and the oxen, his wife will manage. She always has, but her face is unreadable when he places the sack over his shoulder. He walks to the chapel in the dark, where others wait with torches. The priest blesses them, not with joy, but with gravity. Then one by one they kneel before the altar. Some pray. Some don't know how. Some just touch the stone, as if trying to remember it forever. Then they rise, and the torches move into the dark, bobbing like stars across the hills. The road ahead is long. They've heard stories of hunger, of sickness, of men who vanished in foreign lands, never to be named again. But now is not the time for fear. Now is the time to march. He feels the sword at his side, the weight of it, the way it pulls slightly at his belt, with each step. The cross on his chest itches against his skin, a reminder with every breath of why he's here, not for land, not for glory, but for something he doesn't fully understand, something sacred, something terrifying. He doesn't look back, because once the road begins, you can't turn around. Not with a cross on your chest, not with a sword in your hand, not with your soul already promised to something far away and burning bright beyond the edge of every map you've ever seen. Ships to the Holy Land. The air smells of salt, tar, and wood smoke. It's louder here than any village square. Waves slapping the dock pilings, gulls screaming overhead, merchants shouting prices for dried fish and old boots, and the low murmur of hundreds of men waiting to cross the water. The harbour is full. Long ships with high, creaking decks, round cogs with wide hulls and patched sails. Some are painted with crude crosses, others fly the banners of lords who funded their passage. Most have names: Saint Mary, Holy Light, the Redeemer, scrawled across their sterns in chipped, half-faded paint. The men waiting to board wear different clothes, speak different tongues. Some are armored, some barefoot, some haven't eaten in 2 days, but all wear the cross, stitched to tunics, carved into belt buckles, inked into shields. They sleep in alleyways near the docks, curled beneath canvas or beside empty barrels, dreaming of deserts they've never seen, and tombs they'll never reach. The sea is the next trial. For many of them, it's their first time seeing it, the vastness, the movement, the slow, endless shifting of a horizon that never stops. Some cross themselves when they look at it, others stare in silence, unsure if it inspires awe or dread. The priest traveling with them calls it Mare Nostrum, RC, but it doesn't feel like theirs. It feels ancient, watching, indifferent. Loading the ships takes hours, sometimes days. Horses resist the gangplanks, barrels tip, men argue over who gets to sleep under the deck and who stays chained to the oar bench. It's not orderly, it's not glorious, it's just necessary. Once the ship is packed, the prayers begin. Not loud, not grand, just quiet, private murmurs as the wind rises. Salt stings the skin, the ropes creak, the sails snap, then the anchor lifts, and slowly the dock begins to drift away, first by inches, then by strides. The buildings grow small, the voices vanish, the land becomes a line. He grips the side of the ship and sways slightly. This is real now. The stories they've been told of deserts and cities and holy relics are somewhere ahead, days away, maybe weeks, maybe more. Some will never arrive. Everyone knows that, but no one says it. The ship groans as it leans into the wind. He watches the coastline disappear, green hills, smoke from a chimney, a narrow white chapel, perched on a cliff. He stares until it's gone, then he turns, settles beside a bundle of cloth, and closes his eyes. The sea will not be kind, but it will carry them, and for now that is enough. Cities taken and forgotten. The gates are open, but no one cheers. Smoke curls up from the thatched edges of homes. A market stall lies overturned in the mud. There are footprints everywhere, but few voices. The banners that wave above the ramparts are red and white, stitched with crosses. Not the old colors, not the ones the city wore before. They say it was a victory. They say the city was taken in the name of God, that the streets are blessed now, that the blood spilled was necessary. But the streets do not feel holy. They are quiet. Too quiet. Inside the square, a fountain runs red, not with blood anymore, but rust. The stones are stained from the days before, when the fighting stopped and the looting began. A man in a torn tunic picks through rubble beside the ruined chapel. He's looking for something. No one asks what. The crusaders walk the streets like strangers. They are exhausted, faces hollowed by sun and salt and sand. Their armor hangs loose from weight, lost on the march. Some lean on their swords. Others clutch relics or crosses, whispering prayers they no longer feel certain about. They have reached the place they were told to reclaim, but it doesn't look like the sermons described. There are no shining towers, no choirs of angels, just dust and broken doors, and silence that settles like ash. Some kneel beside the altars that still stand, trying to pray. Some walk the perimeter of the city, as if still searching for the enemy they were told would be here. Some are already talking about going home. A few scribes write down what happened. Not the blood, not the chaos, but the result. The city was taken, the enemy repelled, the tomb is ours again, as if that's all that mattered. But no one speaks of the families that fled before the siege. No one records the names of the children lost in the fires. No one writes about the church bell that cracked when the tower burned. This city, this once sacred city, is now a place between things, between conquest and abandonment, between holiness and sorrow, between memory and myth. It will be remembered as a victory, but those who walk its streets now, they will remember it differently. They will remember the way the light fell on the broken glass of a shattered window, the way a hymn sounded strange in an empty cathedral, the way the air still smelled of incense, just beneath the smoke. In time they will leave. New banners will rise. New names will be spoken. New battles will reshape these streets. And this city taken in fire and silence, will be forgotten by those who never saw it, and misunderstood by those who did. But for a moment, it was everything. A place of dreams, of blood, of silence, taken in the name of heaven, and left to the dust of the earth. Knights who never returned. The letters stopped coming years ago. At first there was hope. Maybe they were delayed. Maybe the messenger was robbed. Maybe he had no ink, no paper, no way to write. But after the second year, the third, the hope changed shape. It turned into silence. In the stone manor hall, a cloak still hangs by the door. It's been dusted, mended, kept whole. The colours haven't faded much, but the shoulders that wore it are gone. He left with others, brothers, cousins. sworn men who stood tall in the village chapel the day they took the cross. They were young then, or younger. They had practiced in the fields behind the orchard, swordplay between chores, shields of wood, laughter loud and untroubled. When the Pope's call reached their ears, they didn't hesitate. This was their duty, their chance, their moment to become part of something greater. They didn't know what they were walking into. Most never do. The ones who returned came back quieter, not just from exhaustion or pain or missing limbs, but from something else, something that lingers behind the eyes when you've watched fire fall on a holy city, or felt your friend's hand go cold in yours before you could speak his name. They didn't talk much about those who didn't return, only when asked, and only in fragments. Sir Edric fell near Antioch. Thomas was taken by fever outside Acre. Geoffrey never made it to the sea, but the truth was softer, more uncertain. Some simply vanished, lost in sand, buried in mass graves, or swallowed by years, never written into any record. Back in the villages, they're remembered. By the way a candle is lit at the Feast of All Souls, by a sword hung above a fireplace, no one dares move. By stories told to children, quiet ones, half wrapped in pride, half in sorrow. They say he died with his sword drawn. They say he saw Jerusalem before the end. They say he was singing when he fell, but no one really knows. Their names are carved into church walls, etched into the backs of chapel benches. Some families still keep a little chest beneath the bed with scraps, a ribbon, a seal, a letter from the road, something to hold on to when memory begins to blur. They were knights, yes, but also sons, brothers, lovers, friends, and what remains is not glory, not victory, but absence, the kind that settles into the bones of a place and never leaves. The fields they once walked grow over. The horses they trained are long gone. But sometimes on quiet fog-drenched mornings, you might still feel them, in the hush between the toll of bells, in the way the door creaks open when no one's there, in the silence that follows a prayer, whispered too late, because not every night came home, but they were never fully lost. They live now in echoes, in memory, and in the stories we tell to fill the spaces they left behind. The bitter fruit of holy war. The war is over, they say. The city was taken, the shrines reclaimed, the tomb guarded once more. Victory, they call it. But far from the desert heat, in quiet valleys and wind-swept farms, the story doesn't feel finished. It lingers. Not in trumpets or processions, but in smaller things. In the empty chair by the hearth, in the names no longer called at dawn, in the letters that stopped with no final line. The holy war bore fruit, but not all of it sweet. Some came home changed. They wore the same face, but their voices were slower. Their eyes flicked toward noises that others didn't hear. They no longer knelt in church the way they used to. Their hands, once steady with a plough, now trembled over a cup of ale. They had stories, but few they could tell, and the ones they did share were short. A siege, a child in the road, a chapel burned, with the candles still lit. Some didn't speak at all. And then there were those who gained land, relics, titles, the ones who rose higher when others fell. But even they, behind stone walls and gilded halls, felt something shift. There were more guards at the gates now, more whispered questions in the dark, because the war may have ended, but peace did not come with it. In the markets, people watch strangers more carefully. In the churches, sermons are sharper. There are new walls going up, not of stone, but of suspicion. And the relics brought home from the east, splinters of wood, pieces of cloth, vials of dust, sit in glass boxes behind locked doors. They were meant to sanctify, to heal, but instead, they gather dust while pilgrims pass by in silence. The world feels heavier now, like something sacred was stretched too thin, like the name of God was carved into too many blades, like the road back from the Holy Land was longer than anyone expected. Even the Pope no longer speaks as he once did. His voice is tired, measured, aware now that power carries its own burden. The monks still copy his words, the bishops still preach, but beneath the Latin and the gold leaf, something aches, a quiet realization that perhaps some doors once opened, never close again. And in a village far from the sea, an old woman plants onions in her garden. She doesn't speak of the son who never came back. She just tends the soil, waters, waits, because some wounds are too deep for words, and some fruits, though born of faith, taste only of ash. The battle between church and crown, it begins not with a sword, but with a pen. A letter, sealed in wax, carried by horseback across muddy roads to a royal palace. Another follows, this one bound for Rome. Not soldiers, not scouts, just words. And yet, the ground beneath both throne and altar begins to tremble. The king is not pleased. He sits beneath a painted ceiling, draped in velvet, listening to advisers who whisper with flattery and fear. Somewhere outside, petitions stack up. But this matter, this one, is personal. He rules by divine right. That is what he was told at his coronation, that he is chosen, that the oil on his brow was holy, that his word is law. But the church reminds him otherwise. The archbishop stands beneath a stone arch in the cathedral, robes heavy with gold thread, voice clear and unwavering. He speaks of souls, not subjects, of a law higher than kings, of a power that crowns cannot bend, and the people, they stand between. In the market stalls and chapel pews, they hear both voices, the sermons and the proclamations, the commands from the castle and the warnings from the pulpit. Taxes rise, tithes are demanded, loyalties split, not with banners, but with breath. Do you serve the king? Someone asks. I serve God, comes the answer. But sometimes that means the church, and sometimes it does not. The conflict deepens. The king arrests a priest for disobedience. The pope excommunicates the king. The royal court is thrown into panic. The abbeys close their gates. No armies march, not yet, but the world begins to choose sides. This is not about land, not about borders, it's about authority, about who speaks for God, and who gets to decide what that voice means. In the monasteries, monks pause over their parchment, unsure how to copy the royal decrees. In the villages, travelers bring rumors of bishops fleeing in the night, of papal bulls nailed to cathedral doors, of silence from the pulpit where fire once rang. There is no battlefield, and yet there is war. The queen kneels before the altar in the palace chapel, praying not for victory, but for peace. A young friar in the countryside writes of visions, of kings kneeling and popes rising. And somewhere deep in a forest, a hermit says this is what happens when men mistake power for holiness. Years pass. Treaties are signed, broken, rewritten. An archbishop is murdered. A king walks barefoot to a cathedral to beg forgiveness, publicly but never fully. The people remember, because while crowns may gleam in sunlight and altars may shine with candlelight, neither is immune to pride. And when the two meet in stubbornness rather than reverence, the people suffer, not from fire, but from uncertainty, not from swords, but from silence. And long after the names are carved into marble, and the cathedrals echo with new voices, the battle between church and crown will smoulder on, in laws, in prayers, in who dares to speak, and who is forced to kneel. Power, politics, and prayer. In the grand halls of stone and shadow, power wears many faces. There is the crown's glittering weight, heavy with jewels and expectations. There is the mitres' silent command, a symbol that moves armies without ever raising a sword. And there is the humble altar, where prayers flicker like candles, soft but persistent. These forces do not always agree. Noble families gather in private chambers, speaking in low voices over maps and ledgers. Bishops write letters thick with threats and blessings, their hands steady but their intentions clear. Monks copy prayers and records alike, their quills sharp enough to change the course of kingdoms. At times the church offers sanctuary, walls that shelter refugees and rebels alike. Other times it becomes a fortress of influence, wielding excommunication like a dagger. The king's court is a maze of favors and betrayals. One day a noble is raised to high office, the next cast down on accusations whispered by cloaked figures. Prayers are said in chapels where secrets are bartered. Candles burn not only for the salvation of souls, but for the success of alliances. The church collects tithes, coins that fill coffers and fund armies. The crown commands taxes, levies that feed war horses and build walls. Amid this dance of power, the faithful watch. Some believe the prayers carry true weight, others see them as tools, words woven into webs of control, yet faith endures. In village churches, small and worn, the same prayers rise, unchanged and pure, regardless of who speaks them. In the cloisters, monks whisper psalms by candlelight, hoping their voices reach beyond the schemes of men. And in quiet moments when the swords are sheathed, the letters sealed and the halls empty, there is still a yearning, a hope that power might one day bend toward mercy, that politics might yield to peace, that prayer might truly heal, because beneath the crowns and robes, the battles and bargains, lies a simple truth. Faith is more than a weapon, more than a throne, more than politics. It is a story told in silence, a flame kindled in the dark, and for those who listen, it still whispers of grace. What the common folk were told. The village wakes slowly, as it always does. Smoke curls from chimneys. Chickens cluck near the barnyard. Children chase each other between wooden carts piled with vegetables and rough cloth. The market square hums with familiar noise, barter, laughter, the clink of coins. But beneath the daily rhythms there are stories. Stories carried on the wind. Stories whispered in the tavern. Stories told between neighbors as they mended fences or hushed a crying child. What happened in distant castles and grand cathedrals felt far away. Yet, it touched them all. The church told them the world was ordered by God, that kings ruled by divine right, that wars fought in the name of faith were holy and just, that those who took the cross were chosen, blessed by heaven itself. The Lords told them to work harder, to pray harder, to stay loyal. But the stories changed with each telling. Some said the Crusaders marched for glory, others whispered of greed and land. Some feared the distant enemies, others hoped the wars would bring peace. No one told them the whole truth. Not the hunger that followed the men away, not the fear in the eyes of those left behind, not the empty fields where children once played. Instead, the tales were painted with broad strokes. The enemy was evil, the cause was righteous. The reward was eternal, and so the common folk learned to live with both hope and fear. They prayed for the safe return of husbands and sons. They prayed for the strength to carry on if they did not. They prayed for peace they could scarcely imagine. In the quiet moments when the candles burned low and the village lay still, they wondered, what would become of them if the war never ended? Would the prayers ever be answered? Would the cross always mean sacrifice? No one had answers, only the stories, and the faith to tell them again, day after day. The end of the beginning. The war has faded into memory. The banners that once fluttered across distant hills are now still. The armies have gone. Some in triumph, many in silence, and many never returning at all. The world they left behind is not the one they come back to. Borders have shifted. Names have changed. Old rivalries have deepened, and new ones have quietly taken root. The church's voice has grown louder, but so has the weight it carries. Kings have learned hard lessons, and so have their people. Those who survived return to fields and hearths, homes half full and half empty. They rebuild what war tore down and plant seeds for futures they can only dream of. But this ending is also a beginning. The Crusades were not a single story, but a turning point, a moment when roads opened across deserts and seas, when distant lands came closer, sometimes as friends, sometimes as strangers. Faith and power wove themselves together in new tangled patterns. The world grew larger, and yet somehow smaller. Trade routes shifted, ideas crossed borders, cultures mingled, clashed, and changed, and through it all, the questions remained. What does it mean to fight for God? What price is paid for belief? Who truly holds power in a world shaped by sword and prayer? The answers are never simple, but this story, your story, ends here, in the quiet space between what was and what will be. A moment paused between chapters, a breath held before the next step, and in that stillness, the past and future meet, waiting for you. Because history is never just what happened, it is what we remember, what we forget, and what we choose to carry forward. So now, as the light fades and the day turns soft, it's time to rest, to leave behind the dust of battle and the clang of swords, to let the quiet settle, and maybe, just maybe, to dream of a world where stories like this can help us find peace. Thank you for traveling through time with me. If you've enjoyed this journey, please like and subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. It's been a pleasure to share this story with you. Until next time, take care.